Chapter 245. During this period of time, Yi had grown tremendously, but so had Hu Po. After all, Yi's strength was directly linked to Hu Po's. When they were dealing with Yuan Guang, Lu Yi intended to test his combat strength, so Hu Po didn't make a move. But now, facing this ninth-order ghost cultivator, Hu Po brazenly roared. A long time ago, Lu Yi discovered that Hu Po had some strange abilities. He once asked Yi if Hu Po knew any spells, but Yi said that Hu Po didn't. As Hu Po's strength increased, his strange ability was gradually revealed. It was indeed not a spell, but a talent that awakened from his bloodline. Hu Po's roar didn't kill, but it had a great impact on one's mind. The ninth-order ghost cultivator in front of Lu Yi was caught off guard and his mind buzzed. Although he recovered quickly due to the difference in strength, it also created an excellent opportunity for Lu Yi. The mountain coiling blades stabbed into the ghost cultivator's chest, but unfortunately, it couldn't penetrate his body. The ghost cultivator immediately bowed and retreated, avoiding this fatal blow. Lu Yi didn't show any mercy. He pounced forward and slashed down with his long blade infused with spirit energy like a storm. A series of clanging sounds rang out, and the ghost cultivator's face gradually became frightened. The violent force from the spirit artifact wasn't something he could contend against. Moreover, the speed of his opponent's blade was a little too fast. This short confrontation caused blood to flow from his hand. Suddenly, murderous intent burst out from both sides. It was the house siblings who had been coordinating from the side. The brother and sister had been inseparable since they started cultivating. Their hearts and minds were connected, so their cooperation was naturally flawless. The Sky Pillar sect ghost cultivator turned pale with fright. He only noticed Lu Yi just now and didn't expect there to be two other people nearby. Moreover, they were from the same sect as him. As a ghost cultivator, he naturally knew the consequences of being ambushed by a ghost cultivator. Frightened, spirit energy surged from his body and he lowered his body. Two soft sounds rang out and blood splattered. When the house siblings revealed themselves, they each left a deep wound on the ghost cultivator's body. The ghost cultivator staggered back. Before he could stabilize himself, a bright blade flashed in front of him. He couldn't block this blade as his arm was already numb. The mountain coiling blade slashed down and the ghost cultivator's head flew high, blood gushing out from his neck. With the three of them working together, the ghost cultivator was killed in less than 10 breaths. Lu Yi picked up the man's storage pouch and put it away, then rushed towards the source of the light. Hao Ren and his sister followed closely behind. What's going on? Why are there beast roars? Someone suddenly walked out of the tunnel. He must have heard Hu Po's roar and came out to investigate the situation. They bumped head-on into Lu Ye's trio. You are. The man was still puzzled when a stream of light shot out from the hands of the house siblings. It pierced through the man's body and brought out 2 streams of hot blood. Passing by the corpse, Hao Qing picked up his bag of holding and continued walking. The mine tunnel wasn't dark and was decorated with torches. As the group entered the mine tunnel, all the sky-bearing sect cultivators they encountered were killed in an extremely short period of time. In this load, there were dozens of cultivators mining ores all year round. Most of them were between the 6th and 8th layers, with the higher the cultivation, the fewer people there were. As for 9th-order cultivators, they didn't need to mine ores and only needed to guard the load. Even the sects in the inner circle didn't have many 9th-order cultivators. The 3 9th-order cultivators guarding the load were already dead, so as long as Lu Yi and the others weren't besieged, they wouldn't be in too much danger. In addition, the 3 9th-order cultivators died so quickly that they didn't even have time to spread the news. As a result, the cultivators still working in the load didn't know that danger was approaching. Lu Yi and the house siblings had already separated at a fork in the tunnel. This way, they could increase the efficiency of killing enemies. However, no matter how stealthy they would eventually be exposed. After an incense stick worth of time, a mournful scream came from somewhere in the mine. This aroused the vigilance of the nearby sky-bearing sect cultivators. As messages were sent out, the sky-bearing sect cultivators soon discovered something shocking. That was, the brand of many of their fellow cultivators had disappeared. The disappearance of the brand undoubtedly meant that this person was dead. What made them even more uneasy was that the brand of the 3 Ninth Order senior brothers guarding the lode had also disappeared. Panic began to spread and all the surviving cultivators began to flee the mine, while at the same time, passing the news back to the station. At the sky-bearing sect station, Guardian Zhou Qi and Vice Envoy Yu Hongbao were alarmed. The two hurriedly came out of their cultivation room and when they met, they found that the situation was worse than they had imagined. Not only were the 3 Ninth Order cultivators guarding the lode dead, even Yuan Guang had died at some unknown time, although the brand that cultivators added to each other's marks could determine whether they were dead or alive, no one would check it often. They would only notice it when they needed to send a message. It must be Silver Light Island's doing. Yu Hongbao gritted his teeth. It was no wonder he thought so. So many people had been killed in such a short time, including 3 Ninth Order cultivators. Who else could it be but Silver Light Island who didn't see eye to eye with them? However, Yu Hongbao really couldn't understand why the 4 Ninth Order cultivators, including Yuan Guang, didn't even have time to send a message before they died. From the looks of it, Silver Light Island must have sent a lot of people this time. Luo Fu and Qi Shi, those two bastards, must also be here. Senior brother, should we support the lode? Yu Hongbao asked. We don't know the situation there for the time being. How could Zhou Qi not want to support them? However, no one knew the situation there. If Silver Light Island mobilized a large number of people, rashly supporting them would only give them an opportunity. While speaking, Zhou Qi looked outside the station. Under the dark curtain of night, there seemed to be endless dangers hidden. They had done this kind of thing before, and so had Silver Light Island. After so many years of fighting, who didn't know what the other party was thinking? Send a message to the disciples at the lode and tell them to quickly escape. The more the better. Zhou Qi quickly made a decision. Yu Hongbao knew that this was the only way. Together with Zhou Qi, he immediately sent out a message and gathered all the cultivators in the station to wait for dawn. They could only wait until dawn to know if there was an ambush from Silver Light Island outside. At the same time, in Silver Light Island station a few hundred kilometers away, Luo Fu and Qi Shi, who had no idea what was going on, were sitting opposite each other, playing black and white chess. When Hao Ren and his sister decided to act together with Lu Yi, they sent a message to Luo Fu. After learning that Lu Yi killed Yuan Guang with a 7th Order cultivation, Luo Fu was shocked for a long time. Even if he fought Yuan Guang alone, he wouldn't dare say that he could win, let alone kill him. After all, Yuan Guang was the former vice protector of Sky Pillar sect, so he still had strength. What he couldn't do, a 7th Order cultivator actually did it. Even if he borrowed the power of the spirit array, this kind of strength was still a little too shocking. When Hao Ren decided to act together with Lu Yi, Luo Fu actually didn't approve of it. Jumping around in someone else's station was definitely risky, but considering that Hao Ren and his sister were ghost cultivators who were good at escaping and hiding, he didn't stop them. He knew the strength of Hao Ren and his sister. If the two of them worked together, it wouldn't be a problem for them to fight an ordinary 9th Order cultivator. He thought that Blue Blood Sect's Lu Yi would definitely return empty-handed after reaching Sky Pillar Sect's mineral lode and might even be hunted down. He had already sent a message to Hao Ren and asked him to invite Lu Yi to the station as a guest if there was a chance. He had heard some very strange rumors from some very secretive channels, but as Hao Ren passed back one message after another, he fell into a trance. What's wrong with this world? It feels a little different from the cultivation world I know. What's the situation? Qi Shi asked as he placed his chess piece. It's a long story. Luo Fu didn't know how to explain. If he didn't know Hao Ren's character, he would have suspected that Hao Ren had been captured by Sky Pillar's sect and had given him false information to fool him. Qi Shi frowned. Are Hao Ren and the others in danger? Luo Fu shook his head and reported the names of 3 people. Qi Shi asked, 3 Ninth Order cultivators from Sky Pillar sect? Yes. They are chasing Hao Ren and Lu Ye. They're dead. Now, Hao Ren and his sister have followed Lu Ye and killed their way into Sky Pillar sect's mineral lode. They killed 1 when they saw 1, 2 when they saw 2. TSK, Hao Ren said that blood is flowing like a river over there. Bullshit. Qi Shi couldn't help but curse. I also think he's bullshit. Luo Fu smiled bitterly, then I sent a message to Hao Qing and she said the same thing. Qi Shi's eyes widened. They captured Sky Pillar sect's mineral lode? That seems to be the case. Impossible. Qi Shi said as he hurriedly contacted Hao Qing. A moment later, he received a reply, which was no different from what Luo Fu said before. He suddenly felt a little dazed, feeling that everything around him was not so real. He hesitated. Could it be that Hao Ren and his sister were captured? Obviously, he had the same thought as Luo Fu. But soon, he shook his head and said, if they were really captured, they would most likely commit suicide. They wouldn't betray their sect for glory. But 4 people had captured Sky Pillar sect's mineral lode. This was too bizarre. Sky Pillar sect must be thinking that we did something. Qi Shi thought of another key point. Since something happened to Sky Pillar sect's mineral lode, they will definitely send people to hunt them down. Luo Fu nodded. This is an opportunity. There was no need for him to say more as Qi Shi had already reacted. He threw down the chess piece in his hand and said, I'll gather people. A moment later, hundreds of cultivators gathered in front of Sky Secret Temple's square. Their cultivations ranged from 6th Order to 9th Order. Most of them were Sky Pillar sect's cultivators, while others were rogue cultivators who had attached themselves to Sky Pillar sect or cultivators from other sects. But whether they were rogue cultivators or from other sects, since they had come to Silver Light Island Station, they had to obey orders. No one knew why the Guardian and Vice Guardian had summoned them here in the middle of the night, but they all had a faint feeling that a storm was coming. They were not afraid, but rather excited. Although this kind of large-scale operation was dangerous, it was also a good time to earn merit points. The higher one's cultivation was, the greater the need for merit points. After a short while, Luo Fu threw out a large ship and several hundred people boarded it. Under the joint efforts of the cultivators, the ship rose into the air and quickly drifted in the direction of Sky Pillar Sect Station. Chapter 246. Inside the mine, Lu Yi received a message from Hao Ren, brother Yi, it's time to retreat. The surviving cultivators of Sky Bearing Sect had been alarmed, so the news must have been sent back to their encampment. This place was only 30 kilometers away from Sky Bearing Sect's encampment. If they didn't leave now, once Sky Bearing Sect sent reinforcements, it would be difficult for them to leave. Lu Yi also knew that it wasn't good to stay here for long, so he didn't continue fighting. Under Yi's lead, he walked out of a cave. The exits of this mine were everywhere, mainly to facilitate escape. Mining in the Spirit Stream battlefield wasn't safe. If there were too few exits, it would be easy to block them, so basically every sect's mine had many exits. This made it convenient for Lu Yi, as he didn't need to go back the way he came. After rushing out of the mine, a bird-like sound immediately came from not far away. Lu Yi grabbed Hupa and threw it on the ground, having it transform back into its original form. He then jumped on Hupo's back and rushed over. In a flash, he met up with Hao Ren and Yi and fled madly. They thought that they had poked a hornet's nest this time and would definitely be pursued. Lu Yi had already planned that if there weren't many people coming, he would turn back and attack Hao Ren and Yi. If there were many, he would separate from them and continue to flee, attracting the enemy's attention. The speed of his flying wings was very fast, and ordinary 9th Order cultivators couldn't keep up with it. But after fleeing for a while, there was no movement behind them, which surprised everyone. An hour later, the 3 people and 1 tiger stopped in a hurry on a small hillside. There were no pursuers, so there was no need to run. Hao Ren said, Brother Yi, we seem to have made a mistake. What? The people of Sky-bearing sect probably won't come after us. He had just communicated with Luo Fu for a while, and this judgment was given by Luo Fu. What do you mean? You see, we first killed 3 Ninth Order cultivators and then killed our way into their mine. In Sky-bearing sect's opinion, a large number of cultivators must have come to harm them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lost so many people. Moreover, before the 3 Ninth Order cultivators died, they didn't even have time to send back the news. With such concerns and the dark night, they wouldn't dare to rashly send people out. At this moment, they should be holed up in the encampment's spirit array. When Lu Yi heard this, she realized that things might be as Hao Ren said. Only they knew the situation on their side. Sky Pillar sect didn't know. 3 of the Ninth Order masters guarding the mineral lode had died, and the mineral lode had been captured. Sky Pillar sect would definitely be suspicious, and with the darkness of the night, they didn't dare to attack rashly. Brother, have you become smarter? Hao Qing looked at Hao Ren in surprise. Hao Ren glared at him. He naturally wouldn't tell her that it was senior brother Luo Fu who said this. However, we can't let our guard down. After dawn, the Sky Pillar sect will definitely send people to investigate the mine. At that time, we'll probably be able to figure out the truth. He didn't know how the Sky Pillar sect would feel when they found out that it wasn't a group of people who raided the mine, but only a few people. On the flying spirit tool that looked like a large ship, Luo Fu, who was leading the team, ended his communication with Hao Ren with an indescribable expression. The Sky Pillar sect didn't send anyone to chase after him. What the hell was going on? He had pulled out all the people in the sect. He couldn't possibly bring everyone to see the night scenery and then run back. For a moment, his intestines were in knots. After an incense stick's worth of time, Lu Yi rode on Hupa and under the lead of Hao Ren and his sister, arrived in front of a lake. The night wind blew, and the lake rippled. Even the air seemed to be much clearer. Since they were sure that the people from the Sky Pillar sect didn't chase after them, they relaxed. Previously, when they killed those Sky Pillar sect cultivators in the mine, Hao Qing's body was covered in a lot of blood and was sticky. She came here mainly to wash it. Lu Yi didn't care. Hao Ren raised a bonfire and took out a large piece of beast meat from his storage bag to roast it. Looking at his technique, it was obvious that he was proficient in this field. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked not far away. Hao Qing was standing by the lake and was muttering something. Then, she suddenly threw a large piece of something into the lake. With a bang, water splashed everywhere. As if sensing Lu Ye's confusion, Hao Ren explained, it is said that there is a winged flood dragon in this lake. It likes to eat blood, but it generally doesn't hurt people. So, cultivators who come here to get water or rest only need to throw some blood food into the lake. Winged flood dragon. I haven't seen it either. It should be a very long snake. Lu Yi and Hupa thought of the delicate white snake meat at the same time and felt a little hungry. Hao Ren chuckled, there are legends all over the Spirit Stream battlefield. Who knows if it's true or not? Anyway, as far as I know, no one has ever seen that winged flood dragon. It's probably just a rumor. A moment later, Hao Qing came back after washing up. Her hair was wet, and the beast meat was also roasted. Everyone shared it. After working for most of the night and fighting a big battle, they were naturally tired. Lu Yi and Hao Ren sat down to rest while Yi was responsible for guarding the surroundings. As he cultivated, Lu Yi checked the situation of his spirit apertures. Half a month ago, he had opened 135 apertures, and now he only needed to open one more to reach 144. At that time, his cultivation would reach the 8th order. Having a high cultivation wasn't necessarily a good thing. For example, when he killed Yuan Guang, he received 27 merit points, but if he killed Yuan Guang as an 8th order cultivator, he would only get 18 points. This was one of the reasons why he ran to the inner circle without waiting for him to reach the 8th order. His 7th order cultivation was a little lacking, but the merit points he could get from killing enemies above his realm was really high. Lu Yi took out the storage bag he had collected before and opened it. He couldn't carry too many storage bags, but thanks to Madame Yun's guidance, his lock-picking skills were improving day by day. Opening a storage bag didn't take too much time. While he was busy, Hu Pe, who had shrunk his body, jumped onto his lap and rubbed his head against his stomach. Generally, Hu Pe would only do this for one thing. Lu Yi understood and took out the scale armor. Hu Pe leaned over and took a deep breath, swallowing a line of blood visible to the naked eye. Hu Pe fell stiffly to the ground. His body glowed with a faint red light, which shined brightly with his golden demonic aura. Ever since he obtained this scale armor from 100 Peak Mountain's Dragon Spring, Hu Pe would take a deep breath from time to time. Lu Yi would also place it in the spirit gathering array when he cultivated, but after such a long time, the blood qi in the scale armor hadn't decreased by much. This showed how rich the blood qi contained inside was. Second senior sister Shui Yuan had studied this scale armor before, but she didn't recognize it. She only guessed that there must be some secret hidden under the Dragon Spring. Lu Yi planned to wait until his cultivation was strong enough before going to the Dragon Spring to take a look. He remembered that when he was tempering his body in the Dragon Spring, 2 huge blood-red pupils suddenly appeared in his mind. Putting away the scale armor, Lu Yi continued to open the seal on his storage bag. On the surface of the lake, a layer of ripples appeared out of thin air, followed by layer after layer of ripples silently spreading outwards. In a short period of time, the ripples became densely packed and innumerable. A moment later, a single horn poked out from the surface of the water. A dark shadow moved underwater, as if a huge monster was swimming past. Lu Yi, who was on alert, called out softly. Lu Yi could hear that something was wrong with her voice and quickly looked around. With a single glance, he saw 2 green eyes with vertical pupils, each the size of a washbasin. Even in the darkness of the night, they were extremely conspicuous. Meeting these eyes, Lu Yi immediately felt a great sense of terror and crisis. When he focused again, he could vaguely make out the appearance of the owner of those eyes. It was a huge snake head with a horn on its head. Its entire body was covered in dense snake scales. On the left and right sides of its abdomen, there were 2 protrusions, as if something was about to grow out of them. It was impossible to see how long this snake was because most of its body was underwater, but its body was at least as thick as a large water tank. Their eyes met, but Lu Yi didn't dare to move for a while. He could feel that this thing in front of him was probably on the same level as Xiao Hui in his station, reaching the limit of what could be accommodated in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Even if masters like Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian came here, they still wouldn't be able to win. Fortunately, this giant snake didn't immediately attack after it appeared, and its huge eyes only stared at Lu Yi. Lu Yi didn't know why it was staring at him. "Brother Hao, Brother Hao." Lu Yi called out softly. Hao Ren still didn't know what was going on, so when he heard the call, he responded, "What's wrong?" "You said before, what was in this lake?" "Ing Jiao." Hao Ren suddenly cried out in fear because he also saw those huge eyes. Hao Qing, who was beside him, was also startled. He reacted quickly and quickly held down Hao Qing, who was about to jump up, and then Hao Qing maintained a strange posture of kneeling on one knee and arching her body. Cold sweat slowly flowed down their foreheads, and the atmosphere became tense. No one dared to move because they all sensed that this Ing Jiao was not to be trifled with. If they did something wrong and angered it, they might not live to see the sun tomorrow. "Brother Hao, didn't you say that this thing was just a rumor?" Hao Ren had just mentioned to him that there was a Ing Jiao in this lake, and now he saw it. Lu Yi didn't know whether to feel lucky or unlucky. Hao Ren's voice trembled. "I haven't seen it either. I've been here several times with my little sister, but it has never appeared. Think of a way. Why does it keep staring at me? Think of a way." Hao Ren took a few deep breaths to calm his panic. "Right, it likes to eat blood." Everyone, don't move. I'll get something for it to eat. It might be hungry. After saying that, Haoren slowly stood up. At the same time, Lu Ye's attention was focused to the limit. He was waiting for the Ying Jiao to act strangely so that he could immediately fly into the sky. When he saw the Ying Jiao, he didn't immediately run away, mainly because he was afraid of angering it. If that happened, Haoren and his little sister wouldn't have a good ending. But if this Ying Jiao really had any malicious intentions towards them, then he had no other choice but to fly into the sky and escape. Chapter 247. Haoren slowly got up and bravely took out some beast meat from his storage bag. Basically, every cultivator would have some food in their storage bag, mainly to be prepared. He raised the beast meat and threw it at Ying Jiao. Ying Jiao was indifferent. He threw a few more pieces, but there was still no reaction. It's useless, brother Yi. Sweat dripped from Haoren's forehead. Lu Yi exhaled softly and said, Brother Hao, you guys go first. It's staring at me and probably won't pay attention to you. Then what about you? I have my own way of escaping. Haoren hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, Then be careful, brother Yi. Saying so, he signaled Hao Qing with his eyes, and the brother and sister pair tiptoed backwards. As expected, Ying Jiao did not pay any attention to them. He did not even look at them. This made the siblings feel both aggrieved and inexplicably fortunate. After retreating 100 feet, the brother and sister suddenly merged into the darkness. At this moment, Lu Yi was thinking about a question, and that was, what did Ying Jiao see in him? According to Haoren, the brother and sister had been here several times, but they had never seen Ying Jiao. But the first time he came, he was actually targeted by it. Something was very wrong. Lu Yi recalled what he had done before, then he raised his hand and grabbed Hu Pe, who was lying on his lap, and lifted it to his side. Ying Jiao's eyes also moved. Lu Yi lifted Hu Pe to the other side. Ying Jiao's eyes moved again. He was sure that Ying Jiao wasn't targeting him, but Hu Pe. But because Hu Pe was with him, and Ying Jiao's eyes were so huge, there was no way to accurately judge just now, leading Lu Yi to think that he was being targeted. Hu Pe was a demon beast, which might be the reason why Ying Jiao was targeting it, but Lu Yi felt that the bigger reason was the blood qi in the scales. If it was only because of Hu Pe, the winged serpent would have appeared when Lu Yi and the others arrived. In fact, it had only appeared after Hu Pe had devoured the blood energy in the scale armor. In other words, it had been drawn out by the scale armor that Lu Yi had taken out. The scales looked like dragon scales, but also like snake scales. Ying Jiao's nature was a kind of snake demon, so the blood qi in the scales must be very attractive to it. However, whether or not this was the case still needed to be verified. Yes. Take the items and go underground. As Lu Yi spoke, he reached into his storage bag. In the next moment, he took out the scale armor and threw it to Yi. Then, spiritual energy surged around his body. A pair of fiery red wings spread out from his back, and he soared into the sky. The moment Yi received the scale armor, she sank into the ground. The winged serpent, which had been motionless all this time, suddenly moved. Almost at the same time that Lu Yi soared into the sky, the huge serpent's head slammed into the spot where Yi had been. Dust flew everywhere, and a huge crater was immediately created in the ground. A powerful wave of qi swept out, and Lu Ye's figure drifted away, quickly pulling away. He flew up to a height of 1,000 feet and looked down. He saw a huge creature bombarding the ground below, as if it wanted to find Yi who was hiding below. Demonic qi billowed, its momentum terrifying. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, shaking the earth and mountains with every strike. In just a short moment, a large crater with a radius of over 100 feet and a depth of several feet appeared where Yi was originally standing. As expected, it was because of the scale armor. When Lu Yi saw this, how could he not know that his previous guess was correct? Regardless of whether the scale armor was dragon or snake, it would definitely be of great use to the winged serpent. Otherwise, there was no reason for it to be drawn out. A demonic beast like the winged serpent had already reached the limit of what the spirit stream battlefield could contain. Normally, it would rest at the bottom of the lake, and would not show its head because it no longer had any room to grow. To put it nicely, it was truly lonely to be invincible. To be more realistic, it was just eating and waiting for death. But if it could get its hands on the scale armor, the situation would be different. The reason it was called a winged serpent was because it was only one step away from becoming a flood dragon. Its instincts told it that if it could get its hands on the scale armor, it could become a flood dragon. That way, it would be able to break through the seal of heaven's secret and escape the cage that bound it. Not too far away, the house siblings, who had already escaped from the lake, couldn't help but gulp as they watched the commotion. They didn't know how Lu Yi had provoked the winged serpent to make it so angry. Fortunately, Lu Ye's figure was very obvious, so they didn't need to worry about his safety. High in the sky, Lu Yi looked down. He didn't need to worry about Yi. If she escaped underground, no matter how strong the winged serpent was, it couldn't do anything to her unless it also had the ability to escape underground. Now, he just needed to find a way to shake the winged serpent off. If he wanted to shake off the winged serpent, it would be simple. This demonic beast could sense the blood chi in the scale armor, so he just needed to isolate the scale armor and prevent it from sensing him. In short, put it into his storage pouch. This was the fastest and most effective method. Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint to send a message to Yi. Following his instructions, she put the scale armor into her storage pouch. The winged serpent, who was constantly bombarding the ground, immediately went crazy, and its momentum became even more frightening. After struggling for a while, it could no longer sense the aura of the scale armor. Only then did the winged serpent resentfully turn around and swim back to the lake. The serpent's forked tongue constantly flickered in and out of its mouth, and the demonic chi roiling around its body showed that its heart was not calm. Seeing that the winged serpent was about to re-enter the lake, Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. If he lured this demonic beast to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, what would happen? This was probably an existence on the same level as Xiao Hui. If it was possible, then the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators would definitely be moved to tears. Lu Yi had come to the inner circle to temper himself and take revenge for the Battle of Golden Light Peak. He originally planned to kill as many Sky Pillar sect cultivators as possible while ensuring his own safety. But now, it seemed that his ambition could be even greater. The premise was that he could lure the winged serpent over. Yi, take it out and run. Lu Yi sent a message to Yi. Okay. Yi didn't ask any further and took out the scale armor from her storage pouch. At the lakeside, the winged serpent, who was just about to enter the water, immediately sensed something. It straightened its body and quickly rushed in a certain direction. Its body was nearly 60 meters long, but its speed was extremely fast. Conservatively speaking, even if Hoopo ran at full speed, he wouldn't be able to outrun it. The winged serpent was chasing in the direction that Yi had fled in. It seemed that it could indeed sense the direction of the blood chi in the scale armor. This kind of unreasonable demonic beast's perception was indeed very sharp. Moreover, it was too fast for Yi to shake it off. An hour later, the winged serpent stopped and once again bombarded the ground. This time, Yi was continuously going deeper into the ground under Lu Ye's instructions. The reason for this was because Yi's speed wasn't as fast as the winged serpent. Lu Yi wanted to use this opportunity to test how far the winged serpent could sense the scale armor. There was a limit to Yi's ability to escape underground. The deeper she went, the more serious the interference underground would be. The omnipresent force field was similar to the magnetic force field that pervaded the Origin magnetic Oregon. They both had the effect of confining spiritual power. Therefore, the deeper Yi went, the weaker her strength would be. Once all of her spiritual power was confined, she would be forever trapped underground. 300 meters was Yi's limit. At that distance, Yi's spiritual power would be suppressed by more than half. It would be very dangerous to go any deeper, especially for a spiritual body like hers. A moment later, Yi sent a message, "How is it?" "It's done." Even though Yi had already gone 300 meters, the winged serpent still didn't give up. It had already created a hole more than 30 meters deep in the ground where Yi was. At this speed, if Yi didn't move, the winged serpent would be able to dig her out in less than 2 hours. "Keep running. I'll point you in the right direction," Lu Yi sent another message. "Okay." Soon, under Yi's lead, the winged serpent began to move. Everywhere it passed, trees fell, leaving clear crawl marks on the ground. Lu Yi corrected Yi's direction. After confirming that it was correct, he lowered his body and retracted his wings. He then threw Hu Pe, who had already recovered, on the ground. The house siblings rushed over, both at a loss. "Brother Yi, what's the situation now? Where's junior sister Yi?" Lu Yi flipped onto the tiger's back and said, "Yi is safe. The current situation is hard to say. I can only say that the Sky Pillar sect is probably out of luck." "The Sky Pillar sect is out of luck?" Haoren couldn't wrap his head around it for a moment, but when he glanced in the direction the winged serpent left, he immediately reacted. The winged serpent is going to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment? If nothing unexpected happens, yes. Why is the winged serpent going to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment? It's probably because it's in a bad mood today and its killing intent is a bit heavy. "Brother Hao, let's part ways here." After Lu Yi finished speaking, Hu Pe chased in the direction the winged serpent left, leaving the house siblings at a loss. The winged serpent would definitely be lured to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. This guy was now extremely thirsty for the blood chi in the scale armor and wouldn't give up easily. There were probably many cultivators gathered at the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. After all, he and Haoren had just raided their mine and killed many people. The sky was still dark. The people of the Sky Pillar sect didn't dare to come out to investigate at this time, so they could only wait until dawn. But they probably didn't expect that after waiting for so long, the winged serpent would appear. Hundreds of cultivators gathered, filled with murderous intent, waiting for the winged serpent to attack. What else could be said? The situation would definitely become very lively. Lu Yi didn't know if the winged serpent's ability could break through the Sky Pillar sect's defensive array. He was the one who stirred up this muddy water, so he naturally had to join in the fun. Although the house siblings' cultivation was higher than him by a minor realm, 2 8th order ghost cultivators wouldn't be able to protect themselves in such a chaotic situation, so Lu Yi didn't plan to invite the house siblings. Parting here was the best choice. In the end, they were just strangers who had met by chance. If the winged serpent couldn't break through the Sky Pillar sect's encampment's defensive array, then it was fine. As long as the two sides clashed, the Sky Pillar sect's people would suffer casualties. In any case, Lu Yi didn't mind watching the show, so there wouldn't be any losses. Chapter 248. Haoren stared blankly at the direction Lu Yi left in. The situation had changed so quickly that he couldn't keep up with it. "Brother, why would the winged flood dragon run to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment if it's in a bad mood?" Hao Qing couldn't understand. Maybe the Sky Pillar sect's people provoked it before. So that's how it is. Hao Qing nodded. "My silly sister." Haoren lamented, the winged flood dragon was clearly lured over by Brother Ye. What does it have to do with its mood? Hao Qing was shocked. How did it get lured over? Haoren thought to himself, how would I know? But it was definitely Lu Ye's doing. It didn't make sense for the winged flood dragon, who never showed up before, to have such an abnormal action today. He quickly transmitted, the winged flood dragon has come out. It's suspected to be lured over by Lu Ye. It's heading towards the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. On the spirit ship that accommodated hundreds of cultivators from Silver Light Island, Luo Fu was considering whether to continue forward or return the way he came. He thought that the Sky Pillar sect's mine had been attacked, so they would definitely make some moves. But in the end, the Sky Pillar sect didn't make a move, which made him very uncomfortable. He had brought hundreds of people with him. He thought he could take the opportunity to make a big move, but the Sky Pillar sect didn't give him a chance at all. After dawn, the Sky Pillar sect would definitely investigate the situation at the mine, but once dawn came, they wouldn't be able to hide with so many people. If they were discovered, the Sky Pillar sect would definitely hide in the encampment, which would be equivalent to a wasted trip. Just as Luo Fu was at a loss, he suddenly received a message from Hao Ren. He checked it and his expression gradually became surprised. He knew every word in the message, but when they were put together, he couldn't understand. What did the winged flood dragon mean? Wasn't that thing a legendary monster? How could it be lured to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment by Lu Ye? How could Lu Ye have such ability? Was he lying to him? After thinking for a while, he transmitted, "Junior brother Hao, tell me honestly, were you kidnapped by the Sky Pillar sect?" "Senior brother Luo, I'm telling the truth. I can't believe it, but I saw it with my own eyes. I can't not believe it. Let me tell you, the winged flood dragon was 20 feet long. Its body was as thick as a water tank, its eyes like lanterns, and a horn on its head. It was very fierce." Hao Qing was kidnapped. At the lakeside, Hao Ren was going crazy. He thought for a moment and sent another message. Silver Light Island's disciple Hao Ren and his sister Hao Qing weren't kidnapped by the Sky Pillar sect or anyone else. If what I said to Senior Marshal Brother Luo Fu just now is false, may the heavens strike me with lightning and I'll die a horrible death. I respectfully request the heavens to bear witness. After a while, Luo Fu sent a message, "Still alive? Senior Brother Luo, trust me." Yes. How could Luo Fu not believe that the heavenly secret oath had been made? The legendary winged flood dragon really existed, and it was led to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment by Lu Ye. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. On the deck of the ship, Luo Fu was in high spirits and gave the order, "Full speed ahead." The ship that was originally as slow as a tortoise hummed and trembled. It was wrapped in dense spirit light and quickly headed in the direction of the Sky Pillar sect's camp. In the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, Guardian Zhou Qi and Vice Guardian Yu Hongbao led several hundred cultivators gathered in the plaza of the Heaven's Secret Hall. At this moment, there were some pale-faced cultivators standing in front of Zhou Qi and Yu Hongbao, reporting what had happened. They had all escaped from the ore vein. Although Lu Yi and Hao Ren had killed their way into the ore vein was connected in all directions. It was impossible for them to kill all the Sky Pillar sect cultivators. Naturally, there would be fish that escaped the net. The people who had escaped didn't know what had happened. They only knew that the mine had been attacked and many people had died. As for who had attacked and how many people had attacked, they didn't know. They only knew that there weren't many people who had attacked the mine. Zhou Qi and Yu Hongbao didn't get much useful information, so they could only let the survivors enter. Zhou Qi looked at Yu Hongbao and asked, "What do you think? These people didn't get ambushed when they escaped. Either there was no ambush outside the encampment, or the people who ambushed us had a big appetite." Zhou Qi nodded. He also thought the same. Under normal circumstances, if there was an ambush outside the encampment, it would be impossible for these people to escape. Now that they had returned safely, it meant that the other party was using a long line to catch a big fish. At this time, they had to remain calm. If they rashly sent out more cultivators, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Let's wait for dawn. It's already dawn, so it'll be dawn soon. As Zhou Qi spoke, he turned his head and glanced at the dark night, as if he could see the endless murderous intent hidden in the darkness. Zhou Qi and Yu Hongbao couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. The main reason was that the 3 Ninth Order cultivators guarding the mine didn't even send back a message before they died. Senior brother Yuan Guang also died for some unknown reason. This gave them an illusion that the force that attacked the Sky Pillar sect this time had dispatched a large number of masters. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for 4 Ninth Order cultivators to die without knowing why. Maybe the two nearby Grand Sky Alliance forces had joined forces. They were fighting a battle of wits and courage, but they didn't know that danger was coming from another direction. Under Yi Yi's lead, Ying Jiao approached the Sky Pillar sect encampment with an astonishing momentum. Behind Ying Jiao, Lu Yi rode on Hupa and chased after him. As time passed, the darkness slowly receded and dawn gradually rose on the horizon. The hundreds of Sky Pillar sect cultivators who had been waiting for a long time were only waiting for Zhou Qi's order to kill their way out of the encampment and teach the attackers a lesson. What's going on? Zhou Qi suddenly frowned. He vaguely felt the ground shaking, and there seemed to be a rumbling sound. Yu Hongbao immediately crouched on the ground and pressed his ear to the ground, listening carefully. His face gradually turned solemn. Something big is rapidly approaching here. Ying Jiao. Zhou Qi's voice trembled. What? Yu Hongbao raised his eyes and looked at Zhou Qi, only to see the other party staring in one direction, the corners of his eyes twitching. He quickly got up and followed Zhou Qi's gaze, and he was stunned. The hundreds of cultivators in the Sky Pillar sect's encampment were all dumbfounded. This was because in that direction, a huge snake demon that was 60 meters long was twisting its body and rumbling as it charged. It was actually heading straight for the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. The lake where the Ying Jiao lived was within the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, so the Sky Pillar sect undoubtedly knew more about this vicious beast. Outsiders thought that the Ying Jiao was just a rumor, but the Sky Pillar sect knew that it really existed. Several decades ago, the Sky Pillar sect's older generation cultivators had seen the Ying Jiao swallow the essence of the full moon at night. Over the years, the Sky Pillar sect had thought of subduing this fierce beast and making it their sect's guardian monster beast, but they had never succeeded. After trying a few times and losing a lot of people, they gave up. No one had expected that this vicious beast would actually rush towards the Sky Pillar sect's encampment today. Looking at its aggressive appearance, it clearly didn't come with good intentions. What was going on? Zhou Qi immediately felt that this was Silver Light Island's handiwork, but he quickly rejected this idea. If Silver Light Island really had the ability, they would have already smashed the Sky Pillar sect to pieces. They wouldn't have waited until today. Zhou Qi didn't have time to think about how this elusive vicious beast would leave the lake where it lived. He shouted for the disciples to increase the power of the defensive array formation while praying in his heart that this vicious beast was just passing by and would soon leave. However, praying was useless. The Ying Jiao didn't change its direction in the slightest. Under the gazes of the several hundred cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect, it slammed into the defensive array's light curtain at an extremely fast speed. Boom, a loud sound rang out, and with the point of impact as the center, a shockwave visible to the naked eye swept out in all directions. The defensive array's light curtain dimmed by a large margin and ripples spread out. The dim light curtain brightened once more as the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators frantically urged the array's power. Inside the array, the hearts of the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators violently beat along with the impact. Many cultivators even instinctively lowered their bodies. The violent shock caused some of the buildings in the encampment to rustle. Outside the array's light curtain, half of the Ying Jiao's 60-meter-long body stood upright. Its head was held high and its forked tongue flicked in and out of its mouth. Its dark green eyes reflected panicked faces. Its body leaned back slightly, and its snake body seemed to have turned into a longbow. Seeing this posture, Zhou Qi knew that things weren't good. Sure enough, the Ying Jiao slammed its head down again. Boom, once again, the earth shook and the mountains shook. This time, the impact was even more violent than before. Just now, the Ying Jiao had rushed over with its momentum and didn't have much of a will. However, this time, it took the initiative to attack. The strength of the two was different. The sect's light curtain dimmed a lot before becoming bright again. Boom boom boom, the continuous sounds of the impact were deafening. The entire Sky Pillar sect's encampment was in chaos. The mood of the cultivators also fluctuated along with the sect's light curtain. The Ying Jiao slammed into the sect's protective array like a madman. No one knew why it was doing this. The sect's protective array could still hold on for a short time, but it would definitely be broken after a long time. The several hundred cultivators present wouldn't be able to stop the Ying Jiao's slaughter. Zhou Qi and Yu Hongbao had already asked if anyone in the sect had provoked this fierce beast recently, but they didn't get any useful clues. The only person who knew what was going on was behind a slope 5 kilometers away. He stuck his head out and looked over. Lu Yi followed the Ying Jiao's trail and hurriedly rushed over. At a glance, he saw the Ying Jiao slamming into the sect's protective array. It seemed that it had a deep hatred for the Sky Pillar sect. It was stable. Lu Yi sent a message to Yi and asked about her situation. After knowing that she was fine, he was relieved. At first glance, the sect's protective array looked like a semicircular light curtain covering the encampment. However, it was actually circular. Half of it was on the surface and the other half was underground. This was to guard against sneak attacks from underground. Therefore, even if Yi could escape underground, she couldn't bring the scale armor into the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. However, she didn't need to bring it in. She only needed to hide somewhere underground. For the Ying Jiao, who thirsted for the scale armor and blood qi, anyone who dared to obstruct it was an enemy. Since the Sky Pillar sect's protective array was in front of it, it would break it. Chapter 249. The winged flood dragon was a type of snake monster and was only one step away from transforming into a flood dragon. If it could successfully transform into a flood dragon, it would be able to completely break free from the shackles of heaven's secrets and leave the cage that bound it. However, it had been unable to take this step for so many years. It was only last night when it felt the blood qi in the scales that it knew its opportunity had come. Now that the opportunity was right in front of its eyes, it was blocked by a layer of light barrier. Naturally, the winged flood dragon was furious. Its head was densely covered with snake scales and was extremely sturdy. Every time it charged, it was like a huge hammer smashing into the Sky Pillar sect's protecting array. Zhou Qi stood on his flying spirit tool and floated in the air. He looked at the winged flood dragon through the light barrier and shouted, "Winged flood dragon, our sect and you have always minded our own business. Why are you attacking us today?" Even if a vicious creature like the winged flood dragon couldn't speak, it could more or less understand human speech. Zhou Qi knew that the station was facing a great crisis. If they wanted to resolve this crisis, they had to first figure out why the winged flood dragon had come to attack them. The winged flood dragon raised its head and looked at the tiny figure in front of it. Its forked tongue flickered in and out of its mouth, making a hissing sound. However, after listening for a long time, Zhou Qi still couldn't understand what it was saying. He could only ask his sect's cultivators, who can understand what it's saying. It would be strange if they could understand. The winged flood dragon was already impatient because it suddenly felt that the blood qi that had stopped moving was showing signs of moving again. With a bang, the winged flood dragon slammed its head down again. Zhou Qi was furious. "Winged flood dragon, my Sky Pillar sect has no intention of becoming enemies with you. No matter what you're here for, please leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." How could the winged serpent tolerate such a threat? It suddenly stopped moving. Demonic aura surged around its body, and its green eyes grew deeper. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of green mist at the light screen in front of it. Even though Zhou Qi knew that the fog couldn't do anything to him as long as the sect protecting array wasn't broken, he couldn't help but retreat in fear. With a crackling sound, the light barrier covered by the green mist dimmed at an extremely fast speed. This mist was obviously very corrosive. Fortunately, the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators were frantically repairing it, barely managing to maintain it. Seeing this, the winged flood dragon spat out more green mist. In an instant, the sect's light barrier began to boil, the winged flood dragon's head. After smashing its head too many times, it was also a little dizzy. Now that it suddenly realized that its snake mist was useful, it naturally wouldn't hold back. On a slope 5 miles away, Lu Yi was quietly appreciating this scene. He now had a more accurate understanding of Ying Jiao's strength. This vicious creature could probably break through the Sky Pillar sect protecting array by itself, but it would still take some time. The house siblings ran over again. The reason why they knew that Lu Yi was here was naturally because they had contacted her through communication, too. This was something that Lu Yi was happy to see, as well as something he had expected. When he separated from the house siblings, he had already revealed that the winged flood dragon was going to attack the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. Lu Yi believed that Hao Ren would definitely send this news back to Silver Light Island. As long as Silver Light Island's guardian envoy wasn't stupid, he would realize that this was an opportunity. Now, it seemed that Silver Light Island had indeed mobilized on a large scale. What he didn't know was that the situation was somewhat different from what he thought. Silver Light Island hadn't mobilized after receiving the news of the winged flood dragon, but had already mobilized before. But it didn't matter. Everyone's goal was the same. How long will it take? 2 to 4 hours, Hao Ren replied. 2 to 4 hours was just enough for the winged flood dragon to stall for a while. Once the Silver Light Island's cultivators arrived, they could launch a large-scale attack. At that time, he didn't believe that the Sky Pillar sect protecting array would be able to withstand it. In fact, the Sky Pillar sect protecting array was already on the verge of collapsing. The defensive strength of a sect protecting array was related to the amount of spirit power stored. The more spirit power stored in a sect protecting array, the stronger the defense it could provide at a critical moment. Of course, this kind of storage also had a limit. It couldn't be stored indefinitely. The Jade Blood sect had its own sect protecting array. Lu Yi had taken some time to study it, so he had some understanding of it. The amount of spirit power stored was directly related to the number of array bases in the sect protecting array. That was why Hua Xi had said that the more array bases there were, the stronger the defense. The Sky Pillar sect protecting array had an unknown number of array bases, but its defensive strength was much stronger than the Jade Blood sect's. After all, this was the inner circle. If the defensive strength wasn't enough, it wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of enemy forces. But even if it had enough spirit power stored in a sect protecting array, it still couldn't withstand the winged flood dragon's torment. The dark green snake mist was too corrosive and didn't disperse. It also lasted for a long time. At this moment, the winged flood dragon was surrounding the Sky Pillar sect's light curtain and constantly spitting out snake mist. Looking around, there were large patches of green on the semicircular light curtain. Every patch of green-covered area was accompanied by crackling sounds, and the light curtain was constantly flickering. The spirit force stored in the Sky Pillar sect's protective array was being consumed at an extremely fast rate. It could be said that the damage the winged flood dragon's head could cause to the sect protecting array was still within the acceptable range. If the winged flood dragon only used its head to attack, it would never be able to break the sect protecting array. This was because the sect protecting array's spirit power was constantly being replenished. However, the snake mist was different. After the snake mist was spat out by the winged flood dragon, it continued to corrode and destroy the sect protecting array. This caused the sect protecting array's spirit power to be drained like water being released from a dam. "Senior brother, we can't hold on for much longer." Yu Hongbao rushed to Zhou Qi's side with a solemn expression. Junior brother Zhang Heng said that if we don't find a way to restrain the winged flood dragon, the sect protecting array's spirit power consumption will continue to increase. In less than 6 hours, the sect protecting array will break. 6 to 8 hours. Zhou Qi's eyes were red. He couldn't figure out what had happened to the winged flood dragon. Why did it come here to harm the sky-bearing sect? It had to be known that with the sect protecting array's strength, even if the Silver Light Island attacked, it would be able to hold on for a day or two. However, against the winged flood dragon, it could only hold on for a few hours. Staring at the winged flood dragon, who was constantly spitting out snake mist, Zhou Qi gritted his teeth and said, "Wait a little longer." A fierce beast like the winged flood dragon was too powerful. Even if the sect protecting array's cultivators went out to meet it, they would definitely not be its match. There would definitely be countless casualties. However, he discovered that as the winged flood dragon spat out snake mist, its aura was also weakening. In other words, it had to pay a price for spitting out snake mist. If they wanted to fight the winged flood dragon, they had to wait until it weakened to a certain extent. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fight. The situation was deadlocked. The winged flood dragon couldn't break the sect protecting array for a while, so the sky-bearing sect cultivators could only wait. After another 2 hours, the winged flood dragon's aura had weakened a lot. Yu Hongbao came to report that the sect protecting array's spirit power had decreased even more. Perhaps it could only hold on for another 2 hours. Zhou Qi knew that he couldn't wait any longer. While waiting, he had already made arrangements. At this moment, he raised his arm and shouted, "Open the array and kill the enemy." Under the sky-bearing sect's cultivators' actions, a gap slowly opened in the array. The cultivators who were already prepared swarmed out through the gap. Body cultivators holding various defensive spirit tools were at the front, followed by weapon cultivators and ghost cultivators. Magic cultivators were at the back, and medical cultivators were ready to treat their injured cultivators. The several hundred cultivators of the sky-bearing sect moved in an instant. Spells and spirit tools were the first to bloom. Multicolored rays of light bombarded the winged flood dragon's huge body. The fierce attacks caused the winged flood dragon to stagger and sparks flew from its body. Before the first wave of attacks was over, another wave of attacks was launched. The sky-bearing sect obviously had experience dealing with this kind of powerful monster beast and were well versed in besieging. Under the dense and unending attacks, the winged flood dragon's body became unstable and it kept retreating. At this moment, Zhou Qi's ability could be seen. His decision to hold back until now was really wise. The winged flood dragon had consumed too much of its strength in order to break the sky-bearing sect's array. If it had been at its peak, the sky-bearing sect's hundreds of cultivators would have been useless. With a hiss, the winged flood dragon twisted its body. The monster chi surging on its body had become much thinner. The imperial artifact and spell techniques used by 7th or 8th order cultivators were not much of a threat to it. A single attack might not even be able to break its snake scales, but once there were enough of them, it would cause a qualitative change. The fine snake scales were blasted off, revealing the winged flood dragon's flesh. Under the attacks of the sky-bearing sect cultivators, snake blood flowed out. Several times, the winged flood dragon wanted to open its mouth to spit out snake mist, but the sky-bearing sect cultivators found an opportunity to throw a spell technique into its mouth, forcing it to close its mouth. 5 kilometers away, Lu Yi frowned. The winged flood dragon seemed to be weaker than he thought. Under the siege of the sky-bearing sect cultivators, it actually felt like it had no power to fight back. If the situation continued to develop like this, then the sky-bearing sect would most likely be able to kill this vicious beast. He had worked so hard for half a day, but had he ended up delivering wealth to the sky-bearing sect? He wasn't the only one who thought so. Zhou Qi, who was commanding the cultivators of his sect, also thought so. Seeing the winged flood dragon retreating in defeat, he couldn't help but feel that it was nothing special, causing him to be on tenterhooks for a long time. However, everyone had underestimated the winged flood dragon's cunning. Snakes were vicious by nature, not to mention a powerful snake monster that had transformed into a flood dragon. When the sky-bearing sect cultivators pushed the winged flood dragon back several dozen meters, it suddenly lowered its head without warning. The horn on its head blossomed with lightning, and a bolt of lightning from its arm blasted into the spell cultivator camp behind the crowd. When the bolt of lightning exploded, several weak spell cultivators nearby instantly turned into a bloody mist. Not only that, the fine lightning began to wander, causing a large number of spell cultivators to tremble violently. They had no choice but to interrupt the spell techniques they were casting. Boom! 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 Thunderbolts constantly blasted out from its horn. The spell cultivator camp was instantly unlucky, and 20 to 30 people were killed or injured. The remaining spell cultivators found it difficult to cast any spell techniques for the time being. Zhou Qi's originally excited expression stiffened on his face. The joy in his heart was shattered by the thunderbolts. Chapter 250. Although the sky-bearing sect cultivators knew about the existence of the winged flood dragon, no one had ever fought with it, so no one knew what this snake monster was capable of. Until now. After luring the sky-bearing sect cultivators a few dozen meters away, the winged flood dragon suddenly showed its might. Its previous display of weakness was just to lure the enemy out of the protective range of the spirit array. A few bolts of lightning fell, and the attacks of the cultivators stopped. The winged flood dragon finally had a chance to catch its breath. It opened its mouth and aimed at the imperial artifact streams of light lingering around it, spitting out a dark green snake mist. Exclamations rang out as the armament and ghost cultivators who were attacking the enemy with their spirit artifacts discovered to their horror that the connection between them and their spirit artifacts had been cut off. The reason why cultivators could use artifact manipulation was because once they reached the 7th Order realm, they would be able to control spirit chi outside of their body. By storing spirit chi in their spirit artifacts in advance, they would be able to control it when needed. This was artifact manipulation. Of course, this was the artifact manipulation method used by spirit stream realm cultivators. Once a cultivator was strong enough, they would be able to form their divine sense. At that time, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Those Spirit Sea Realm cultivators could directly use their divine sense to control their artifacts. Therefore, the key to artifact controlling for Spirit Stream Realm cultivators was to control the spirit chi stored in their spirit artifacts. However, the dark green snake mist was too corrosive. Even the sky-bearing sect's spirit array couldn't withstand it, let alone these spirit artifacts of different quality. The moment they were enveloped by the snake mist, the spirit chi stored in the spirit artifacts was eroded, and the connection between the cultivators and their spirit artifacts was naturally cut off. Asterisk ding ding dang 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 asterisk a dense sound rang out as the spirit artifacts in the sky fell down like dumplings. This time, at least 100 spirit artifacts lost control. The winged flood dragon spat out a few more mouthfuls of snake mist, and even more dumplings fell. The spirit artifacts that were lucky enough not to be corroded by the snake mist were all recalled by their masters, not daring to be presumptuous in front of it. The sudden change made it difficult for the spell cultivators of the sky-bearing sect to cast their spells. The armament and ghost cultivators' artifact controlling also lost its deterrence. In other words, the sky-bearing sect's long-range attacks were directly suppressed. Zhou Qi's mind buzzed as he felt a chill rush to the top of his head. Ying Jiao lowered its head, its dark green snake eyes flashing with a cruel light. It swung its body slightly, and its huge snake tail was like a wall as it slammed towards the body cultivators at the front. The body cultivators had been prepared for a long time. Their blood and chi surged on the surface of their bodies, and the defensive spirit artifacts in their hands shone brightly. Each of them was as steady as a mountain. There was a loud boom, the radiance of the spirit artifacts dimmed by a large amount. Some of the defensive spirit artifacts that were of insufficient quality were directly turned into fragments under this attack. Along with them, the figures of several body cultivators were sent flying. All of them spat out mouthfuls of blood in mid-air, their expressions dispirited. Only a few 9th Order body cultivators managed to block this violent blow, but even so, they were still forced back as their bodies trembled violently. The attack of a ferocious creature like winged Wyrm wasn't something that they could endure at all. If it wasn't for them having the advantage in numbers, merely that attack from before would have caused all of them to perish on the spot. This was not the end of it. After the winged flood dragon's attack, it raised its long tail high and smashed it into the crowd with a loud bang. Those who were quick to react had already run away, while those who were slow to react were directly smashed to the point where not even their bones remained. With just a few strikes, the winged flood dragon's counterattack had disrupted the sky pillar sex formation. The snake tail rose and fell again and again, and with every strike, someone would die. As if it wasn't satisfied, the winged flood dragon stretched its head down and bit down on the body of a weapon cultivator who had leaped high into the air. As the weapon cultivator screamed in horror, his body was bitten in two. Blood spurted out from the snake's mouth. The visual impact of this scene was too strong, and many cultivators collapsed on the spot. Being struck to death by the winged flood dragon's lightning or being smashed to death by its tail was nothing, but being bitten to death by such a bloody mouth was too terrifying. "Run!" Someone couldn't bear it and shouted. "Who's shouting?" Zhou Qi, whose eyes were red, flew into a rage. If the scene wasn't too chaotic, he would have found the person who shouted and killed him. At this critical moment, it was too hateful to shake people's hearts. No one can run. Spell cultivators, cast your spells quickly. Weapon cultivators, ghost cultivators, use your talismans. Body cultivators, block it with me. He was originally commanding from the rear, but at this moment, he couldn't care too much and directly rushed forward. This was because he knew that if he, the guardian, didn't do anything, their formation would be completely disrupted. At that time, it would be even more impossible to resist the winged flood dragon's slaughter. The winged flood dragon was indeed strong, but there were hundreds of sky pillar sect cultivators, and they weren't soft persimmons that could be easily pinched. Seeing that Zhou Qi was personally going into battle, the panicked cultivators slowly calmed down. The spell cultivators finally got rid of the disturbance of the lightning power. Spiritual power surged around their bodies, and they once again cast spells. The weapon cultivators and ghost cultivators who had lost their imperial equipment also began to take out their talismans. A group of cultivators led by Zhou Qi stood in front of the winged flood dragon, silently enduring its anger. When looked at from afar, numerous tiny figures that were like ants were scattered in an area in front of the enormous serpent's body. Multicolored lights ceaselessly assaulted it from behind, causing the winged WYRM to hiss endlessly. The scene was rather magnificent. It had to be said that Zhou Qi was indeed an amazing person. In such a situation, he decisively rushed out and took the lead, not allowing his side's momentum to collapse. After paying a considerable price, the situation was actually stabilized by the Sky Pillar sect cultivators. Being able to sit in the position of guardian of a sect's encampment was indeed not for nothing. After using up their talismans, the weapon cultivators and ghost cultivators also rushed forward with their spirit tools. Under the cover of the body cultivators, they constantly hacked at the winged flood dragon's body. Although the winged flood dragon's casual attack could cause them to die without a burial ground, they didn't hesitate. The winged flood dragon's scales had an extremely strong defensive power and were as hard as steel. However, no matter how strong the defense was, it couldn't stop the furious cultivators' fearless attacks. The casualties of the Sky Pillar sect cultivators were increasing, but the winged flood dragon's injuries were also increasing. The huge snake's body was densely covered in wounds, and many of its scales had already fallen off. If the situation continued to develop like this, the winged flood dragon might really be repelled. However, it was unrealistic for the Sky Pillar sect cultivators to kill it, because the winged flood dragon would definitely escape if it sensed that something was wrong. Facing hundreds of cultivators by itself, including many in the 8th or 9th order, the winged flood dragon was worthy of being the strongest monster beast in the spirit stream battlefield. Even if Xiao Hui came over, it wouldn't be able to do better. However, the situation definitely wouldn't develop like this. Just as the Sky Pillar sect's morale was at its peak, the figure of a large ship suddenly appeared in their eyes. The large ship was flying in the air, several dozen meters above the ground. Its speed wasn't too fast, but it definitely wasn't slow either. At the bow of the large ship was a pattern that the Sky Pillar sect cultivators were familiar with. That pattern represented Silver Light Island. On the deck, Luo Fu's figure was clearly visible. The people of Silver Light Island had arrived. Standing on the deck, Luo Fu poured his spirit energy into his eyes and watched the battle outside the Sky Pillar Sect station from afar. When he found that it was the same as Hao Ren's real-time message, he was overjoyed and couldn't help but laugh. The heavens are really helping me. Sky Pillar Sect, are you going to die this time? Behind him stood a group of Silver Light Island cultivators, all of whom were rubbing their fists. Zhou Qi, who was leading the charge, turned green. The station was being attacked by the winged flood dragon, and the cultivators of the sect had suffered heavy casualties. At this critical moment, their sworn enemy, Silver Light Island, had suddenly come. There was no worse news in the world than this. Last night, when the sect's mineral vein was attacked, he felt that it was Silver Light Island's doing. He originally planned to send people to investigate the situation after dawn, but before he could take action, the winged flood dragon attacked. Zhou Qi didn't have the strength to deal with other matters and could only deal with the trouble in front of him first. Now, it seemed that it was Silver Light Island's doing last night. They must have been lying in ambush in the dark, waiting for an opportunity. At this moment, they finally couldn't hold back. Was the winged flood dragon's attack related to Silver Light Island? Zhou Qi didn't know. If it was related, then it was too terrifying. But if it wasn't, then it could only be said that the Sky Pillar Sect's luck was too bad. Retreat to the station. Zhou Qi roared and dodged the winged flood dragon's ferocious attack. However, the strong impact still sent his body flying and he fell heavily to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Facing the winged flood dragon alone, the Sky Pillar Sect might still have the strength to fight, but Silver Light Island also came to join in the fun, so they couldn't show off. Almost at the same time he gave the order, another gap opened in the defensive formation. The Dharma cultivators in the rear hastily withdrew, followed by the ghost and weapon cultivators, and finally the body cultivators. At this moment, the winged flood dragon was already ferocious because of its injuries. How could it let the people of the Sky Pillar Sect retreat safely? As the cultivators retreated, the power of lightning once again appeared on its fleshy horn and struck down, causing rivers of blood to flow in front of the sect's defensive formation. In less than an incense stick's worth of confrontation, the Sky Pillar Sect had lost nearly 100 people. It could be seen how ferocious the winged flood dragon was. After striking out a few bolts of lightning, the winged flood dragon's momentum weakened greatly. It seemed that it had consumed a lot of energy, so it couldn't use the power of lightning without restraint. The formation closed once more, and the pursuing winged flood dragon was once again blocked outside the light barrier. It madly charged forward, and the wounds on its body split open, dripping with blood. On the other side, under Luo Fu's command, Silver Light Island's large ship brazenly passed by the winged flood dragon and the Sky Pillar Sect's encampment. Under the despairing gazes of the Sky Pillar Sect's cultivators, it landed on the other side. Figures walked down from the large ship and gathered into a formation of several hundred people in the blink of an eye. The expressions of the Sky Pillar Sect's cultivators became even more desperate. The winged flood dragon was still charging at the formation, spitting out snake mist from time to time. It had an almost unsolvable thirst for scales. The Sky Pillar Sect alone couldn't stop it, not to mention that the people of Silver Light Island had also arrived. Once they took action and attacked from two sides with the winged flood dragon, the Sky Pillar Sect's formation would collapse even faster. Luo Fu, were you the ones who led the winged flood dragon here? Inside the formation, Zhou Qi, who was in an extremely sorry state with blood flowing out of the corner of his mouth, looked at Luo Fu through the light barrier. Luo Fu chuckled and said, "How could my Silver Light Island have such great ability? It was just a coincidence." Chapter 251. Inside the formation, Zhou Qi stared into Luo Fu's eyes, trying to see if he was lying, but he couldn't. "You're not going to run? Then I won't be polite." Luo Fu raised his hand with a smile and waved it forward. Two words floated out of his mouth, "Let's get to work." Behind him, multicolored light blossomed and fell on the Sky Pillar sect's defensive formation, creating ripples. The Sky Pillar sect had been around for many years and had experienced countless crises, but it had never been as unsolvable as it was today. With the winged flood dragon in front and Silver Light Island attacking from behind, the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators couldn't see any hope. Yu Hongbao stood beside Zhou Qi and softly said, "Senior Martial Brother, let's retreat." Although the formation could still hold on for a while, it wouldn't last much longer in this situation. Once the formation was broken, the Sky Pillar sect's cultivators would truly become turtles in a jar. At that time, they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. Retreat where? Zhou Qi's gaze was dull. Yu Hongbao's dry lips trembled, but he didn't dare to say those two words. If they wanted to retreat now, they could only return to the 9 provinces through the Pillar of Heaven's secrets. But if they really did that, the sect's many years of accumulation would have to be submissively handed over. Not to mention whether or not they could bear the responsibility of losing their base, they couldn't accept this result. If they retreated, how would they have the face to continue living in this world? What qualifications would they have to call themselves disciples of the Sky Pillar sect? Zhou Qi suddenly said, "We might still have a chance." Yu Hongbao knew that his senior martial brother always had his own ideas, so he looked at him expectantly. Senior martial brother means, Zhou Qi didn't say anything and only sent him a message through the battlefield imprint. Yu Hongbao looked at it and felt that it was true, so he couldn't help but nod. Zhou Qi once again looked at Luo Fu. Luo Fu, if news of Silver Light Island being able to control the winged flood dragon were to spread, do you know what the consequences would be? Luo Fu, who was watching the winged flood dragon struggling to break the formation through the light screen, was startled. He instinctively felt that something was wrong and frowned. "What do you mean?" Zhou Qi grinned. "You can think about what I mean." Although Luo Fu felt that this fellow was exaggerating, he could not help but fall into deep thought. Ying Jiao had been lured here by Lu Yiye of the Jade Blood sect and had nothing to do with Silver Light Island. However, other than the house siblings, only Luo Fu and Qi Shi knew about this. The Sky Pillar sect had no idea. Under such circumstances, it was only natural for them to mistakenly believe that Silver Light Island could control Ying Jiao. Once a ferocious creature like the winged flood dragon unleashed its might, even a sect's encampment's grand array would not be able to withstand it. The Sky Pillar sect's encounter was a precedent. So if this matter really spreads... Luo Fu's expression stiffened, and cold sweat gradually formed on his forehead. Originally, in this small area, the foundations of the various large sects were almost the same. Although there was constant friction, no one could do anything to the other. However, if Silver Light Island had a top helper like Ying Jiao, how could the forces of Myriad Devil Ridge not be afraid? This fear would definitely arouse the hostility of the Myriad Devil Ridge forces. This was akin to roasting Silverlight Island on a fire. "Zhou Qi, you scoundrel, don't slander us. Ying Jiao has nothing to do with my Silverlight Island. This is clearly a monster beast of your Sky Pillar sect's encampment," Luo Fu immediately shouted angrily. Although he was eager for his sect to be able to control such a demonic beast, if they did not have enough foundation, even if they could use such a demonic beast, it would not bring them any good. It would only arouse the hostility and targeting of the nearby forces in the Myriad Devil Ridge. If 4 or 5 Myriad Devil Ridge forces joined forces to launch a sneak attack on them, Silver Light Island would not be able to withstand it. Who knows if it has anything to do with you? As far as I know, your Silver Light Island has a monster beast elder. That elder seems to be a snake monster, right? These words were so vicious that Luo Fu did not dare to respond for a while. Silver Light Island did indeed have a monster beast elder, and it was indeed a snake monster. Moreover, it was a sea snake monster. This was not a secret. After being neighbors for so many years, who did not know each other's backgrounds? If today's matter were to spread, it would be difficult not to arouse suspicion. If there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, Silver Light Island's situation would not be too good in the future. Luo Fu vaguely understood Zhou Qi's intentions and slightly lowered his eyes. Are you trying to say that in order to prove my innocence, Luo Fu should withdraw from this place? I didn't say that. I'm afraid you're dreaming. Luo Fu coldly snorted. You dog likes to bite at random. When your great formation is broken, if I don't beat the shit out of you, consider yourself lucky. Although joining forces with Ying Jiao to break the formation would indeed arouse some suspicion, how could Luo Fu miss such a heaven-sent opportunity? In any case, since the people of Silver Light Island had come, they would not retreat. As for the future, he would deal with it later. The people of Myriad Devil Ridge dared to join forces against Silver Light Island, and the people of Grand Heaven Alliance were not united enough. Zhou Qi was delusional to think that he could make Silver Light Island withdraw with just a few words. While Zhou Qi and Luo Fu were negotiating, Yu Hongbao stood beside Zhou Qi. Seeing that Luo Fu was unmoved, he could not help but sigh. He felt that senior brother Zhou Qi was thinking too simply. If he were in Luo Fu's position, he would also not retreat. This was a great opportunity to attack and occupy the enemy's base. Seal the heavenly secrets. Zhou Qi suddenly ordered softly. Yu Hongbao was startled. Immediately after, his expression changed. He softly said, Senior brother. Seal the heavenly secrets. Zhou Qi clenched his teeth. Yu Hongbao's expression was solemn. Yes. Following his actions, the heavenly secrets were sealed. The so-called sealing the heavenly secrets was only sealing the heavenly secrets pillars. This way, the cultivators of Sky-bearing sect would not be able to use the pillars to return to the 9 prefectures. This was to prevent people from escaping when they saw that the situation was not good. The Sky-bearing sect was already in a bad situation. If someone took the lead to escape, it would inevitably lead to great chaos. At that time, they would really have to surrender their base. Yu Hongbao thought that Zhou Qi wanted to lead the cultivators of his sect to live and die with the base. Naturally, he felt solemn. Zhou Qi also saw this and comforted him. There is still a chance. Yu Hongbao shook his head. Senior brother, do you think I am afraid of death? The sect raised me. Now that it is time for me to contribute to the sect, I am not afraid of death. I am only afraid that I will not be able to kill a few of those bastards from Silver Light Island before I die. Since Zhou Qi had made a decision, he could only accompany him. If the Sky-bearing sect did not have a good time, Silver Light Island would not have a good time either. Before he died, he would drag a few of them down with him. Ying Jiao was not ordered by them, Zhou Qi said again. His conversation with Luo Fu just now seemed to have no effect, but in fact, he was just beating around the bush. How could he not know that it was impossible for Luo Fu to be persuaded with just a few words? He just wanted to understand whether Ying Jiao's attack had anything to do with Silver Light Island. Luo Fu's attitude made him certain of one thing. Ying Jiao and Silver Light Island had nothing to do with each other. The two really just happened to meet at the same time. After confirming this, Zhou Qi's heart was filled with bitterness. He could not understand why his own sect's luck was so bad. He also could not understand why Ying Jiao would target the Sky-bearing sect. The two sides had lived together peacefully for over 100 years. He beckoned to Yu Hongbao and whispered a few words. Yu Hongbao's eyes gradually lit up as he listened. He could not help but nod and send out a message. Soon, the cultivators of the Sky-bearing sect knew the plan of their guardian and deputy. At the same time, they also knew that their station had been sealed. Even if they wanted to retreat to the 9 regions, it would be impossible. With their retreat cut off and Zhou Qi's plan as a foundation, although the cultivators of the Sky-bearing sect were still nervous, they were not as desperate as before. The light curtain of the Grand Formation was extremely dim, as if it could break at any time. Hundreds of cultivators of the Sky-bearing sect gathered in the square in front of the Divine Secret Hall. Guardian Zhou Qi and Deputy Yu Hongbao were at the forefront of the formation. The entire group was facing the cultivators of Silver Light Island, ready to go. Luo Fu, who had been observing the situation, naturally saw this scene. In a flash, he seemed to understand something and exclaimed, "Not good." At this moment, he finally understood what Zhou Qi was planning. The sky-bearing sect wanted to divert the disaster by borrowing Ying Jiao's power. He immediately wanted to send a message to Hao Ren and ask if Lu Ye had a way to control Ying Jiao, but it was already too late. Open the formation. Following Zhou Qi's solemn and stirring roar, the grand formation that was about to break instantly disappeared. Without the obstruction of the grand formation, Ying Jiao immediately rushed into the sky-bearing sect station and rampaged towards the place where the cultivators of the sky-bearing sect were gathered. Wherever he passed, a burst of sand and stones would fly. Kill! Zhou Qi roared again and led the cultivators of the sky-bearing sect to attack with Yu Hongbao. The scene was spectacular for a moment. Ying Jiao chased after the sky-bearing sect, while the sky-bearing sect attacked Silver Light Island. The people of Silver Light Island were dumbfounded. Luo Fu's heart sank. The situation was just as he thought, but it was already too late. Stop them! Luo Fu roared. On the other side, Hao Ren and his sister, who were watching this scene from afar, also had their hearts in their throats. Hao Ren whispered, "Brother Ye, we can't let Ying Jiao rush to Silver Light Island." Lu Yi didn't say anything. He had already jumped onto the slope and was watching with rapt attention. His hand tapped on the battlefield imprint and was constantly sending messages to Yi. He didn't expect that the sky-bearing sect would be so tenacious in this desperate situation. He originally thought that after the people of Silver Light Island arrived, the cultivators of the sky-bearing sect would immediately retreat to the 9 provinces because the defensive formation definitely wouldn't be able to withstand being attacked from 2 sides. In the sky-bearing sect station, the distance between the cultivators of the 2 sides quickly closed. The light of a spell lit up from Silver Light Island's side and blasted forward, followed by the light of a flying tool. However, in the face of the attack from Silver Light Island, the sky-bearing sect only defended and didn't counterattack. They blocked all the incoming spells and flying tools. When the distance between the 2 sides was only 40 zhang, Zhou Qi suddenly roared, "Scatter!" The entire sky-bearing sect's group immediately split into 2. With him and Yu Hongbao in the lead, they split left and right and circled around in an arc, preparing to outflank Silver Light Island. When the cultivators of the sky-bearing sect scattered to the left and right, a huge figure appeared in the eyes of the cultivators of Silver Light Island. Then, the spells and flying tools that were sent out smashed onto Ying Jiao's body. Ying Jiao, whose scales had fallen off, raised its dark green eyes and looked at them. Amidst the surging monster essence, a large amount of its scales fell off. Percent. Luo Fu immediately cursed, his mind exploding. Chapter 252. Zhou Qi's plan was very simple. The Sky Pillar sect was already at the point of life and death. Since they were unwilling to return to the 9 provinces, they could only divert the disaster. However, there was a prerequisite for this plan to succeed, and that was that the winged serpent was not under the control of Silver Light Island. Otherwise, it would be impossible to implement. The conversation with Luo Fu allowed Zhou Qi to confirm this point. He immediately had Yu Hongbao seal the heavenly secrets, took the initiative to open the formation, and led the cultivators of his sect to rush towards Silver Light Island. When they were 40 zhang away, they dispersed, revealing the winged serpent behind them. They rushed straight towards the place where the cultivators of Silver Light Island were gathered. In order to stop the Sky Pillar sect, the cultivators of Silver Light Island had used a lot of techniques and imperial tools, which all landed on the winged serpent. The winged serpent hissed, and its green eyes reflected the panicked faces of the cultivators of Silver Light Island. Its aura also began to become brutal. Luo Fu, who was standing at the front of the crowd, felt his blood turn cold. He felt that his life had fallen from the peak to the bottom. The ups and downs were really exciting. The winged serpent opened its mouth and spat out a green snake mist. Many imperial tools were contaminated by the snake mist and fell to the ground. "It's over," Luo Fu lamented in his heart. When Zhou Qi looked back, he saw the winged serpent spit out the snake mist. He was overjoyed, knowing that his plan had succeeded. Now, what he needed to do was simple. He would lead the cultivators to the rear of Silver Light Island and block their retreat, letting them deal with the winged serpent. The encampment was originally in danger of being captured, but with his strategy, he had turned defeat into victory. He had even borrowed the strength of the winged serpent to catch Silver Light Island off guard. He could almost imagine the praise the elders of the sect would have for him after this matter was spread back to the sect. From now on, he would be put in an important position by the sect and receive all kinds of cultivation resources. Perhaps he could even use this opportunity to propose marriage to the sect master. Marrying the sect master's only daughter would allow him to reach the peak of his life. His beautiful dream was suddenly shattered because the winged serpent did not attack the cultivators of Silver Light Island. Instead, it turned around and chased after them. Zhou Qi's face turned green on the spot. Why? Why? The Sky Pillar sect had never provoked the winged serpent, so why was it targeting the sect? Seeing the winged serpent actually change direction, Luo Fu, who was about to call out to meet the enemy, swallowed his words. A message came from the battlefield imprint. He hurriedly took a look and found that it was a message from Hao Ren. Only then did he understand why the winged serpent and turn around to chase after the cultivators of the Sky sect of Lu. He reached into his storage bag and took out a wine gourd. Trembling, he brought it to his mouth. The ups and downs of life were simply too exhilarating. He drank a mouthful of wine to calm his nerves. After the wine entered his stomach, Luo Fu calmed down a little and shouted, "Only defend, don't take the initiative to attack." Hundreds of Silver Light Island cultivators gathered together. The body cultivators took the initiative to stand at the outermost circle, the weapon cultivators were at the back, and the weak magic cultivators and ghost cultivators were at the center. Their faces were pale, and their hearts were trembling with fear. But after watching for a while, he realized that the situation had become very delicate. Outside of them, the scattered cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect had once again gathered into a group. Under the leadership of Zhou Qi and Yu Hongbao, they were fleeing for their lives. Behind the cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect, the winged serpent was in hot pursuit. With the Sky Pillar sect as the center, the two sides ran in circles. From time to time, the winged serpent mist would spurt out, and the power of lightning would occasionally fall from its horn. Screams would occasionally come from the Sky Pillar sect. What was going on? The cultivators of the Silver Light Island were dumbfounded. Normally, they would be unhappy to be ignored like this. In any case, they had several hundred cultivators gathered here. Ignoring them meant that the winged serpent didn't put them in its eyes. But in the current situation, they couldn't wait to be ignored. It wasn't that they were ignored. The people of the Sky Pillar sect didn't have time to attack them. They were all running in circles, and the winged serpent was chasing after the cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect. After observing for a while and confirming that their current situation wasn't right, they were still safe. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. They clicked their tongues in wonder. After all, none of them had experienced such a thing. Traitor Luo Fu, you still dare to say that the winged serpent wasn't ordered by your Silver Light Island? Zhou Qi's angry voice sounded. At this time, how could he not understand that he had been deceived? The winged serpent was definitely ordered by the people of the Silver Light Island. Otherwise, there was no reason for it to only focus on them. They were running in circles with all their might, but the winged serpent was like a maggot in their bones. F***CKU. Luo Fu wasn't willing to be outdone and cursed back. When the winged serpent was rushing towards them, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out. Your Silver Light Island is doomed. You'll have to survive today first, you bastard. The two sides had a friendly and fervent exchange. Return to the 9 provinces. Zhou Qi roared unwillingly. The original plan had failed. If they didn't return to the 9 provinces now, not only would they lose their encampment, but their cultivators would also suffer heavy casualties. Under his and Yu Hongbao's lead, the cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect rushed towards the Tianji Hall. Luo Fu's expression was somewhat eager. He clearly wanted to intercept the people of the Sky Pillar sect, but if he really did so, he might accidentally injure the winged serpent. It wouldn't be good if he attracted the winged serpent's hatred. Therefore, even if the opportunity was rare, Luo Fu could only endure for the time being. As far as the eye could see, the cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect were rushing towards the Tianji Hall under Zhou Qi's lead. The winged serpent was in hot pursuit, as if there was some irreconcilable enmity between them. When they arrived in front of the Tianji Hall, the people of the Sky Pillar sect didn't rush in. Instead, they hurriedly set up a formation. On one hand, they let the strong body cultivators block the winged serpent, while on the other hand, they let the magic cultivators and medical cultivators evacuate through the Tianji Pillar. The two sides fought in front of the Tianji Hall, and the rumbling sounds were incessant. However, the Sky Pillar sect had already suffered many casualties. When they were chased by the winged serpent, another batch died. At this moment, as more and more cultivators returned to the 9 provinces, the strength of their defense was rapidly decreasing. Finally, the winged serpent broke through the defense of those body cultivators and plunged into the Tianji Hall. Immediately, a few miserable screams came from inside. Those were the cultivators who didn't have time to return to the 9 provinces. Rumbling sounds came from the Tianji Hall, as if the winged serpent was going crazy. The survivors kept running out of the Tianji Hall. There was no way to stay inside. The winged serpent's body, which was more than 60 meters long, stirred up the Tianji Hall into a mess. Staying inside was just waiting for death. Zhou Qi lay in the ruins covered in blood. He looked at the hundreds of Sky Pillar sect cultivators scattered around with gloomy eyes. He knew that the Sky Pillar sect was finished this time. 5 miles away, Lu Yi flipped onto the tiger's back and said to Hao Ren, "Let your people attack, but don't enter the Tianji Hall." Hu Pa rushed out and ran straight to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. Hao Ren and his sister followed closely behind and sent a message to Luo Fu halfway. After receiving Hao Ren's message, Luo Fu immediately ordered the hundreds of cultivators from Silver Light Island who had been guarding the encampment to kill their way into the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. At this moment, the Sky Pillar sect's encampment was like a defenseless young girl. With hundreds of evil men breaking into her home, the outcome could be imagined. When Lu Yi arrived at the place on Hu Pa, rumbling sounds were still coming from the Tianji Hall. The entire Tianji Hall was trembling. Corpses and blood could be seen everywhere in the square of the Tianji Hall. The casualties of the Sky Pillar sect cultivators were hard to calculate. Perhaps some had escaped, but the number was definitely not too many. However, even if those who had escaped back to the 9 states were counted, the Sky Pillar sect's Spirit Stream Realm cultivators had been badly beaten. The people of Silver Light Island were cleaning up the battlefield while Luo Fu stood in the square and waited. "Senior brother Luo." Hao Ren and his sister came over with Lu Yi. Luo Fu nodded slightly and turned to look at Lu Yi with a hearty smile. "Is this fellow Taoist Yi? I've heard a lot about you." "Greetings, fellow Taoist Luo." As expected of a tiger sect genius. Fellow Taoist Yi's methods are amazing. This Luo admires you. Although Lu Yi had not shown up from beginning to end, Luo Fu knew that the main reason they were able to capture the Sky Pillar sect's encampment was this youth in front of him. If he had not been able to control the winged flood dragon, how could the Sky Pillar sect have suffered such heavy losses? Even now, he still did not understand how Lu Yi, a 7th-order Spirit Stream Realm cultivator, could control a vicious beast like the winged flood dragon. However, he would not rashly inquire about it. This matter should not be known by too many people, otherwise it would easily arouse fear. Now that the Sky Pillar sect's encampment had been captured, the next step was naturally to plunder the benefits. Luo Fu turned his head and glanced at the noisy Heaven's secret hall with a solemn expression. Fellow Taoist Yi Yi, my Silver Light Island will take 20% of the benefits obtained this time. What do you think, fellow Taoist? As the garrison of a sect's encampment, Luo Fu could not act according to his personal preferences. Although he wanted to befriend Lu Yi, public was public, private was private. This time, he had brought several hundred cultivators from Silver Light Island. Since they had already captured the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, he could not return empty-handed. Otherwise, he would not be able to explain himself to the sect. Lu Yi had indeed contributed greatly, but Silver Light Island was not completely useless. If it were not for the arrival of several hundred cultivators from Silver Light Island, the Sky Pillar sect could have forced the Winged Flood Dragon to retreat. For Lu Yi, he originally only wanted to use the Winged Flood Dragon to cause some losses to the Sky Pillar sect. Silver Light Island's help at the critical moment was an unexpected surprise. It could be said that the arrival of Silver Light Island's cultivators had completely crushed the Sky Pillar sect's defenses. From their point of view, taking 30 to 40% was not excessive. However, Luo Fu had other plans, so he said 20% so as to avoid making others unhappy. Lu Yi shook his head. Let's take 50%. We'll split it 50-50. Luo Fu suddenly felt a little embarrassed. This is not good, not good. Fellow Taoist Luo doesn't need to decline. In fact, I have a request. If fellow Taoist insists on not agreeing, then it will be difficult for me to ask. He intended to form an alliance contract with Silver Light Island because Silver Light Island was the closest inner circle sect to the Jade Blood sect. If he could form an alliance contract, then the Jade Blood sect's cultivators would be able to come to Silver Light Island to cultivate. Now that he was giving away some benefits, would he be afraid that his sect's cultivators would not be taken care of when they came to Silver Light Island in the future? When going out, having someone to take care of you and having no one to take care of you were two different things. Lu Yi, who was wandering alone, had a deep understanding of this. Chapter 253. Moreover, a few months ago, when Lu Ye's identity was exposed and he was hunted down by the myriad demons Ridge, it was the people from the Haotian Alliance who protected him along the way. If it weren't for those unknown cultivators, Lu Yi would have died on the way. Therefore, even if he didn't have any friendship with the people of Silver Light Island, Lu Yi was willing to give them more benefits because they were also part of the Grand Heaven Alliance. If the two factions were not sincere and united, they would have been nibbled away by the other side long ago. Luo Fu didn't know what Lu Yi wanted, but he had a vague guess. He was a straightforward person, so he only pondered for a moment before laughing. Alright, I'll definitely be friends with Brother Yi Yi. He added a brand to Lu Yi on the spot. Lu Yi sent another message. After a short while, Ying Jiao rushed out of the divine secret hall with a rumbling sound. It gradually disappeared under the gazes of the Silver Light Island cultivators. It was led away by Yi. Previously, it had chased after the cultivators of the Sky Pillar sect and even killed its way into the Tianji Hall because Yi was following Lu Ye's instructions. As far as the Flood Dragon was concerned, it didn't care about the grudges between cultivators, nor did it want to bully the weak. For so many years, it had been living in seclusion in the lake where it lived. If it wasn't for the scale armor being too attractive to it, it wouldn't have caused such a big commotion. Brother Yi Yi, please. Luo Fu gestured. This time, Lu Yi didn't refuse. Instead, he walked into Divine Secret Palace. Looking around, he saw that the palace had been completely wrecked. There was even a huge crater in one corner, and there were a few snake scales next to the crater. He arrived in front of the Divine Secret Pillar and placed his hand on it. He used his identity as the guardian of the Jade Blood sect to plunder the blessings of the Sky Pillar. He could clearly feel that many things were being added to the imprint. It was as if they were imprints. As he plundered, the Pillar of Divine Secrets kept making cracking sounds, as if it could collapse at any time. However, Lu Yi knew that this thing couldn't be broken. After all, it was a gift from the heavens. This was the reaction of plundering blessings. It was the same as purchasing blessings from the divine pillar. Some of the mysterious structures within the divine pillar were related to the density of spiritual energy in the area covered by the divine pillar. During the process of purchasing or plundering blessings, these mysterious structures would change. The heaven and earth spirit chi in the sky pillar sect's encampment was decreasing at an extremely obvious rate. After a short while, Lu Yi walked out and nodded slightly at Luo Fu. Luo Fu followed closely behind. When he came out, the heaven and earth spirit chi in the sky pillar sect's encampment was almost the same as in the wild. Lu Yi did not know how much she had gained. She would only know after returning to the blue blood sect because plunder could not be directly converted into merit points. She had to store them in the blue blood sect's heaven's fate pillar. Unfortunately, in the process of plundering, a large number of blessings were consumed. Otherwise, the harvest would have been even greater. The cultivators of Silver Light Island were still looting. The Sky Pillar sect had their own spirit fields and medicinal gardens. There were some spirit flowers and strange herbs planted inside, all of which were good stuff. Moreover, the range of the Sky Pillar sect's encampment was much larger than the Blue Blood sect's. This was not a benefit of the inner circle, but rather something that the Sky Pillar sect had bought with merit points. The range of the Heaven's Fate Pillar was the range of a sect's encampment. At the beginning, every sect was the same. By spending a certain amount of merit points, they could expand the range of the Heaven's Fate Pillar and then expand the range of their encampment. A large encampment would have ample space, which naturally had its benefits. Therefore, in theory, if one had enough merit points, the range of a sect's encampment would be limitless. They could even expand the range of their own encampment to the side of another sect's encampment. However, theory was just theory. In reality, no sect had enough merit points to expand the range of their encampment. 2 hours later, the cultivators of Silver Light Island regrouped and boarded the ship under Luo Fu's command. He sent an invitation to Lu Yi, and Lu Yi naturally did not refuse. She just happened to follow Luo Fu to the Silver Light Island's encampment. At a glance, one could tell that this large ship-like flying spirit tool was not cheap. Silver Light Island had probably spent sect merit points to buy it from the Heaven's Fate treasury. However, compared to the Wyvern ship that Lu Yi had once sat on, it was still far inferior. The Wyvern ship was a truly powerful weapon for sieging cities and strongholds. On the other hand, Silver Light Island's large ship was only a flying spirit tool. It had a certain amount of defensive power, but it had no offensive capabilities. After arranging for Lu Yi to rest in a cabin, Luo Fu went about his business. Silver Light Island had also suffered some casualties in this battle, but it was very few. There was also the spoils of war that needed to be accounted for, half of which belonged to Lu Yi. When the cultivators of Silver Light Island boarded the ship and returned, news had already spread to the nearby major forces through different channels. This was naturally the handiwork of the already dead Zhou Qi. Before his death, he had revealed that Silver Light Island could control the winged flood dragon. His goal was very simple. Since his own encampment had been harmed, he had to make the other forces of Myriad Devil Ridge more vigilant. Moreover, after he revealed this information, it was very likely that the nearby Myriad Devil Ridge forces would join forces to besiege Silver Light Island. After all, being able to control a winged flood dragon was too terrifying. If it was a sect in the core circle, they might not be so afraid. There were many masters in the core circle who had converted to heaven-grade secret arts, but in the inner circle, a winged flood dragon was basically an unbeatable existence against any force. With such concerns, the nearby Myriad Devil Ridge forces would not be able to sleep peacefully for fear that the winged flood dragon would come knocking on their door one day. Of course, there was also another possibility. Under the deterrence of the winged flood dragon, the Myriad Devil Ridge forces would no longer dare to provoke Silver Light Island. Zhou Qi did not know how things would develop, but he was about to die, so how could he care so much? He would first reveal the information about the winged flood dragon. This caused the nearby major forces to quickly dispatch people to rush to Sky Pillar sect's encampment to investigate the situation. Not only were there people from Myriad Devil Ridge, but there were also people from Grand Heaven Alliance. It was unknown how Zouchi's information had leaked to Grand Heaven Alliance so quickly. When they arrived and took a look, a group of Ninth Order cultivators from different backgrounds were all worried. The entire Sky Pillar sect's encampment was a mess at this moment. Countless houses had collapsed, and there were traces of fire left behind. That's right, before the people of Silver Light Island retreated, they had set this place on fire. It was truly inhumane. The flowers and plants in the spirit fields and medicine gardens, whether they were mature or not, had all been pulled out. There were still traces of a great battle left on the square of Heavenly Fate Hall. Traces of blood and corpses that had yet to dry could be seen everywhere. The entire Sky Pillar sect's encampment could be said to be a mess. After receiving the news that the cultivators of Silver Light Island had retreated, the Sky Pillar sect cultivators who returned from the 9 states to investigate the situation knelt on the ground and howled towards the sky, weeping bitterly. It was too tragic. More and more cultivators rushed over to investigate. As a result, a great battle broke out. The Ninth Order cultivators from both sides fought fiercely, and in the end, no one knew who won. Half a day later, at Silver Light Island's encampment located in the mountains, Lu Yi led Yi off the ship with Hoopa lying lazily on his shoulder. Luo Fu personally led Lu Yi to a small 2-story building and settled him down. He also said that he would hold a welcoming dinner for him in the evening. This time, Lu Yi had contributed greatly to the destruction of Sky Pillar sect's encampment, so he needed to hurry back to the sect to report and had no time to accompany him for the time being. He told Lu Yi that if he had any needs, he only needed to tell the house siblings. After Luo Fu left, Lu Yi told the house siblings to rest and to send them a message if he needed anything. He then went up to the 2nd floor with Yi. On the way back, Lu Yi learned from Yi that after she lured Ying Jiao 10 kilometers away, she put the scale armor into her storage bag. However, Ying Jiao was stunned. He threw a tantrum at the place where the aura of the scale armor disappeared before dragging his long body away. Yi looked at him from afar and found that his eyes seemed a little lonely. Looking at the direction Ying Jiao left in, it seemed that he was going back to the lake where he had been living. As for whether that was true or not, Yi wasn't sure because Lu Yi had already sent her a message to tell her to come back. In the room, Yi was meditating to recover while Hoopa was eating a spirit pill. Yi had been traveling underground with the scale armor and had consumed a lot of energy, so she naturally needed to recover now. Lu Yi checked his spirit aperture, considering whether to break through to the 8th Order. Previously, he considered that killing enemies in the 7th Order would give him more merit points, and now that he had the capital to kill enemies 2 realms above him, he wouldn't be afraid even if he faced a 9th Order. But now, it seemed that killing a 9th Order as a 7th Order would take some effort, so he might as well break through to the 8th Order as soon as possible. Moreover, how could the merit points obtained from killing enemies compare to capturing enemy sects' encampments? Most of the merit points he had obtained so far were obtained by killing enemies. Only a small number of merit points were obtained from killing enemies. It was more important to break through to the 8th Order as soon as possible. Cultivation was his greatest guarantee. Fellow Taoist Yi. Suddenly, a shout came from downstairs. Lu Yi poked his head out of the window and saw a young man in green standing below. As if he felt Lu Ye's gaze, the young man raised his head and smiled gently, cupping his fists. "Sorry for disturbing you, fellow Taoist. Please wait a moment." Lu Yi retracted his head, went downstairs, and opened the door. The young man was standing outside, followed by Hao Ren and his sister. At this moment, the two were holding a large pile of storage bags in their arms. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi immediately understood that Silver Light Island had come to divide the spoils for him. This was quite efficient. This one is Silver Light Island's Vice Guardian, Qi Shi. Greetings, fellow Taoist Yi. Fellow Taoist Qi is too polite. Please come in. This small building should be used by Silver Light Island to receive guests. The upstairs was a place to rest, while the downstairs was a place to receive guests. After leading Chi-Shur and the house siblings inside, Chi-Shur said, "These things are half of the proceeds obtained from Silver Light Island. Senior brother Luo had an agreement with fellow Daoist before, so I decided to send them over." "Fellow Daoist, where do you think is suitable?" "There were at least 100 or 200 storage bags in this pile. Please send them upstairs." Yi led the way, leading the house siblings upstairs and putting down the storage bags before going downstairs. After the house siblings left, Lu Yi and Chi-Shur chatted. Lu Yi was mainly learning from others. He wasn't proficient in managing encampments, while Chi-Shur was the vice guardian, so he naturally had experience. There was no harm in learning from others. Yi sat on the side, brewing tea while listening silently. Lu Yi occasionally glanced at her, a little surprised. He didn't know that Yi had such an ability. Chapter 254. The sect will certainly reward us for our great victory. According to Senior Marshal Brother Luo's wishes, a celebratory feast will be held tonight to welcome fellow Daoist. Chi-Shur's voice sounded in the side hall. Before Senior Marshal Brother Luo left, he asked me to ask fellow Daoist if it would be convenient for you to come forward. After all, fellow Daoist contributed greatly to the success of this battle. Lu Yi understood what he meant when he said that. In the eyes of most Silver Light Island cultivators, the Sky Pillar sect's encampment had been captured because they had been targeted by Ying Jiao for some unknown reason. However, a small number of insiders understood that Ying Jiao had been lured over by Lu Yi. During the final battle, the reason why Ying Jiao had chased after the Sky Pillar sect's people and avoided the Silver Light Island's people was because of Lu Yi. Therefore, Lu Yi had contributed greatly in this battle. Since it was a celebratory feast, Lu Yi naturally couldn't be absent. However, if it were to be publicly announced, it would expose that Lu Yi could control Ying Jiao to some extent. Moreover, the name of Jade Blood sect's Lu Yi was hated by the people of Myriad Devil Ridge. Once it was exposed, it might bring Lu Yi a lot of inconvenience. Luo Fu and Chi-Shur didn't intend to steal the credit and reported everything to the sect without concealing anything. However, they had to consider Lu Yi's wishes. It had to be said that they were very considerate. Lu Yi reckoned that someone of Luo Fu's character wouldn't have considered this. It should be Chi-Shur who had thought of some key points and was using this visit to probe Lu Yi's intentions. We were able to win this battle because the fellow Taoists of the Sky Pillar sect worked together and encountered Ying Jiao's attack. It didn't have much to do with me. Hearing this, Chi-Shur nodded. I understand. After chatting with Lu Yi for a while, Chi-Shur bid farewell and left. Yi closed the door and excitedly ran to the second floor with Lu Yi to count their gains. Even with Lu Yi's current lock-picking efficiency, it would still take him 2 or 3 days to open all 100 or 200 storage bags. However, there were a few storage bags that weren't locked, and inside were all strange flowers and plants, as well as spirit tools. These flowers and plants were definitely plundered by the Silver Light Island cultivators from the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. As for the spirit tools, after the Sky Pillar sect's people died, the spirit tools naturally became ownerless. Just by looking at these things, it was clear that Luo Fu and Lu Yi had agreed to split the spoils 50-50. We're rich! Yi excitedly shouted. She had never seen so many storage pouches piled together. Lu Yi picked up the storage pouches to break the restriction locks. Every time she opened one, Yi would count the spoils and put them into the storage pouches that she had prepared beforehand. When night fell, noises gradually came from outside. Moreover, it was getting more and more lively. It seemed that many cultivators had gathered. Yi looked over and saw that the cultivators of Silver Light Island were all gathered at the plaza of Tianji Hall. They had set up tables and chairs. The plaza was decorated with all kinds of illumination objects, brightly illuminating the entire plaza. A moment later, a fragrance wafted over. The Silver Light Island cultivators were preparing to hold a celebratory feast. They had been enemies with the Sky Pillar sect for over 100 years, but they had never had such a hearty victory, so it was naturally exciting. Hoopa, who was sleeping soundly, smelled the fragrance and raised its head to look at Lu Yi with an expression that said it was hungry. Haoren and his sister led a group of people over and set up a table on the first floor. Exquisite delicacies were continuously sent over. Silver Light Island had even considered Hoopo's request and sent over a large piece of fresh beast meat. A moment later, Luo Fu's resounding voice came from the Sky Pillar sect's plaza. The general idea was that he didn't disappoint the sect's expectations. Everyone had worked hard in this expedition to the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, and they should continue to work hard in the future. From time to time, there would be loud cheers, and the celebratory feast began. A moment later, Luo Fu and Qi Shi arrived together. "Brother Yi, I'm really sorry." Luo Fu apologized as soon as he opened his mouth. Silver Light Island's celebratory feast was bustling with noise and excitement, but the biggest contributor was hiding here, so he was really sorry. However, after listening to Qi Shi's analysis and Lu Ye's previous decision, Luo Fu knew that he had underestimated the situation. Although this was a bit unfair to Lu Yi, it was the best choice. "It's fine." Lu Yi smiled and led them into the room. They toasted each other while Yi looked on worriedly. Lu Yi had never drunk before. Perhaps it was because of Li Baxian, but when they were in the Blue Blood sect, Second's senior sister prohibited everyone from drinking. Even the sect master sometimes drank secretly when he was greedy. So, Yi didn't know if Lu Yi could drink. Fortunately, after 3 rounds of drinking, Lu Ye's expression was normal. After all, he was a 7th order cultivator. How could he get drunk so easily? At the table, Luo Fu took the initiative to mention an alliance contract with the Blue Blood sect. Lu Yi gladly agreed. This was also his purpose in coming to the Silver Light Island station. The two immediately signed an alliance contract with the authority of their respective station. This way, the disciples of the Blue Blood sect could come to the Silver Light Island station for life experience in the future. They could even spend merit points to directly teleport back to the Blue Blood sect station. I heard some rumors before that the 2 neighboring forces of the Blue Blood sect in Myriad Demon Ridge have been crippled. I wonder if this is true. When the insect tide broke out, this matter was not small, but this place was still a bit far from the Blue Blood sect station. Luo Fu and the others had heard people mention it by chance, but they didn't pay much attention to it. The inner circle didn't pay much attention to the matters of the outer circle, just like how the core circle didn't pay much attention to the inner circle. It wasn't that they looked down on them, but that the sects of each inner circle had their own allies and enemies. They had their own matters to deal with. There is such a thing. It's related to the insect tide. And there was a sect called Heavenly Fiend Temple that didn't handle the insect tide well, causing it to break out and implicating the Feng family. My Blue Blood sect took advantage of the situation to launch a surprise attack and killed many people. So that's how it is. Luo Fu nodded. So, the Blue Blood sect is very safe. You can say that. Brother Luo, is something the matter? Lu Yi noticed something. Luo Fu sighed and said, "It's like this. One of my sect's elders has a beloved daughter who has been cultivating in the sect station and is now a 3rd order cultivator. Brother Yi also knows that the world energy of the inner circle sect station is rich and the efficiency of cultivation is high, but it's not good to keep cultivating behind closed doors. As a cultivator, how can we not see blood? That junior sister has been clamoring to go to the outer circle to gain experience. These days, she has been pestering me to find a way to send her out. Brother Yi, you don't know, but I get a headache when I see her now, but the elder doesn't agree. He's afraid that my junior sister will encounter an accident in the outer circle. If the Blue Blood sect situation is so good, I think we can send her to the Blue Blood sect. For the time being, no one dares to attack the Blue Blood sect station. With Xiao Hui in charge, who would dare to come and die? Ying Jiao almost broke the sect defending array of the Sky Pillar sect station by himself, so how could Xiao Hui, who was on the same level as him, be inferior? I'll go back and ask that elder's opinion on this matter. After eating and drinking for a while, Luo Fu and Qi Shi took their leave. After all, they were the guardian and vice-guardian. Tonight's celebration banquet was lively, so it was inappropriate for them to stay at Lu Ye's place. They had to go drink a few cups with their junior brothers and sisters and brag. After sending Luo Fu and Qi Shi away, Lu Yi shook his head and laughed thoughtfully. What are you laughing at? Yi was puzzled. Nothing. Tell me. Yi grabbed Lu Ye's hand and shook it, acting like a spoiled child. I have already signed an alliance contract with Luo Fu. If he really wants to send his sect's cultivators to the Blue Blood sect to gain experience, he doesn't need to inform me. However, he asked me about the situation at the Blue Blood sect and told me about his junior sister. He wants to tell me that his junior sister has a noble status, so when she goes to the Blue Blood sect, he wants them to take care of her. Then why don't you just say it directly? Why do you have to beat around the bush? Lu Yi raised his hand and pinched her face, twisting it left and right. There are some things that are meaningless if they are explained clearly. The little girl's touch was getting better and better. Yi angrily slapped his hand away and pouted. However, Luo Fu's request wasn't a big deal. The Blue Blood sect would take care of the people they sent, so when the Blue Blood sect's disciples came, they would definitely enjoy the same treatment. This was the way of the world. Under the night sky, Luo Fu and Qi Shi walked side by side. Qi Shi said, Senior brother, that fellow Taoist Lu seems to be very good at using others to do his dirty work. What do you mean? Look, in the outer circle, the Blue Blood sect's Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng clan were crippled by him using the insect tide. When they came to the inner circle, the Sky Pillar sect was crippled by him using Ying Jiao. Luo Fu was startled. He hadn't realized this before, but now he understood, so, 3 myriad demon rich forces have already fallen at his hands? Moreover, that fellow Taoist Lu just said that the Heavenly Fiend Temple failed to resist the insect tide, causing it to erupt and even the Feng clan to suffer. However, the insect tide that the sects in the outer circle have to deal with is actually not difficult. As long as they work together, it is impossible for the insect tide to erupt. At most, they will lose some people. You mean, I'm afraid that fellow Taoist Lu is involved in this. As for what he did inside, I don't know. Just like this time, those who don't know wouldn't know that he was the one who lured Ying Jiao over. Luo Fu thought about it and found that it was true. Although the insect tide was a natural disaster, as long as it was dealt with in time, it could be dealt with, unless someone was secretly plotting something. Moreover, he is only in the 7th order, but he can kill a 9th order cultivator 2 realms above him. With such talent and means, if he is allowed to grow. It's terrifying. Luo Fu clicked his tongue, I'm afraid that Myriad Demon Ridge won't have good days in the future. Qi Shi said, yeah, I'm just glad that he's from Grand Heaven Alliance. Luo Fu laughed, then we should celebrate. Let's go, we're not going home until we're drunk. Senior brother, I'm talking business with you. Qi Shi was dragged to the square by Luo Fu with a helpless look. Soon, a large group of cultivators gathered around, each holding a wine jar. Chapter 255. It had been 3 days since Sky Pillar Sect Station was taken. In the guest hall of Silver Light Island Station, Luo Fu was receiving several cultivators. These cultivators were all 9th order cultivators, both men and women. Each of them was either a guardian or a deputy guardian of a sect station, and without exception, their stations weren't far from Silver Light Island. Because Qi Shi had warned him before, Luo Fu knew what was going on when he saw them come together. Sure enough, these people were all here to inquire about Ying Jiao. They all said that if Silver Light Island was willing to use Ying Jiao to help them capture the enemy station, they would split the benefits 40-60. They would take 40 and Silver Light Island would take 60. The news that Zhou Qi had sent out before his death was effective. Now, not only were the nearby forces of the Myriad Demons Ridge extremely fearful of Silver Light Island, even some people from the Grand Heaven Alliance believed it. That was why they had come here to discuss the alliance with Luo Fu. In this regard, Luo Fu was willing but powerless. If Silver Light Island could really using Jiao, then there was nothing to say. They could cooperate with these forces and take down several Myriad Demon Ridge forces stations. At that time, they could share all the benefits. The key was that they couldn't controlling Jiao. The one who could controlling Jiao was someone else. Luo Fu couldn't say it clearly. In the end, he had no choice but to swear a heaven's secret oath and tell them that Silver Light Island was able to take down Sky Pillar Sect Station by luck and that Ying Jiao had nothing to do with Silver Light Island. After swearing a heaven's secret oath, the guardians who came to ask for help left in disappointment. After sending them off, Luo Fu glanced at the cultivation room. Junior Brother Qi, did Brother Yi tell you that he wants to cultivate and gain experience here? No, Qi shook his head. What a pity. If Lu Yi was really willing to join Silver Light Island, it would undoubtedly be good news for Silver Light Island. Not to mention Ying Jiao, Lu Yi's strength alone was enough to make them pay attention. Since Lu Yi didn't mention it, there was a high probability that he wouldn't stay here for long. This kind of thing couldn't be forced. It all depended on one's own will. When I get back, I'll try to sound him out and see if I can get his help again. If he can really control that winged flood dragon, then we'll go and destroy the Misty Cloud Order. I've been annoyed by those weird bastards for a long time. The Misty Cloud sect was another Myriad Devil Ridge faction that neighbored the Silver Light Island. Although the enmity between them wasn't as great as the enmity between the Silver Light Island and the Sky Pillar sect, since they were neighbors, there was no lack of friction. If they could destroy the Sky Pillar sect first, then the Cloud Smoke sect, then the Silver Light Island would be able to dominate the surrounding 1,000 miles and do whatever they wanted. At the same time, in a practice room, Lu Ye's spiritual energy was surging, constantly attacking the barrier of his spiritual aperture. Along with a light sound from the spiritual aperture, the 144th aperture's barrier was broken, and a trickle of spiritual energy flowed in. 144 spirit apertures was the standard for breaking through to the 8th order. Lu Yi didn't stop and continued to circulate his spiritual energy, passing through the idle spiritual cavities and forming a small cycle. Waves of energy swept out from his body, indicating that he had broken through to the 8th order. From the 7th order to the 8th order, it took Lu Yi about 50 to 60 days. This speed wasn't fast for him, because when he was in the Blue Blood sect, he followed Madame Yun to cultivate spirit runes during the day. But right now, he didn't need to advance too fast. Cultivating too fast without enough time to consolidate his foundation wasn't a good thing. It would only create an empty shell without the strength to match it. Li Baxian had also told him that he must pay attention to solidifying his foundation while cultivating. For an ordinary cultivator, breaking through from the 7th order to the 8th order in less than 2 months was still very fast. Fortunately, Lu Yi had experienced a lot of battles, and he could enter the Mirage Realm at any time to temper himself. Everything he experienced in the Mirage Realm was extremely real, including the feeling of death. The combat skills and experience accumulated through repeated deaths were not something ordinary methods could compare with. It was the essence of recording one's life and injuries. So, even if Lu Ye's cultivation speed was fast enough, he could still maintain a combat strength that far exceeded his peers. He continued to swallow spirit pills to cultivate, wanting to see how many spirit pills it would take to open a single aperture after reaching the 8th order. After half a day, he concluded that it would take about 35 spirit pills to open a single aperture. This was undoubtedly a terrifying number. Back when he was in the 3rd or 4th order, he only needed a dozen or so spirit pills to open a single aperture. At that time, he already felt that it was a lot, but compared to now, it was nothing. The higher the cultivation, the more spirit pills it would take to open a single aperture. From the 8th order to the 9th order, it would take 36 new spirit apertures to open. If he only used spirit pills to open his apertures, he would need to consume more than 1,200 spirit pills. Of course, Lu Ye's current cultivation didn't just rely on swallowing spirit pills, so the real consumption would definitely be less than half of this number. Suddenly, Yi's muffled groan came from the side, and her face turned a little pale. She had died in the Mirage realm. Yi also had merits. Since the sect master had branded her with the battlefield mark, she was a disciple of the Blue Blood sect. She could also obtain merits by killing enemies, but most of her merits came from the monthly salary that Hua Xi distributed to her last time, so it wasn't much. Coupled with her previous gains from killing enemies, she had less than 1,000. Her merits were useless, so Lu Yi let her enter the Mirage realm to gain experience. She would encounter many battles in the future, so the Mirage realm was a good place to temper herself. Is it fun? Not at all. Yi was annoyed. It was obvious that she had been taught a lesson by those insects in the Mirage realm. Take your time. Yi replied in a muffled voice and sat down to restore herself. Lu Yi, on the other hand, took out an item from his storage pouch to refine. It was a flight-type spirit artifact from the 9th order cultivator named Yuan Guang, and its quality was quite good. After the 7th order, there was a watershed. When one's cultivation reached this level, they could use flying artifacts to kill enemies. After reaching the 8th order, one could use flying artifacts. Of course, how fast and how far one could fly depended on one's foundation. Generally, 8th order cultivators didn't use flying artifacts because it consumed too much energy, and they couldn't fly fast or high enough. It was easy to be targeted in the wild, and once they were shot down from the sky, they wouldn't have a good ending. This situation would only improve after reaching the 9th order, so those who dared to use flying artifacts in the wild were basically 9th order cultivators. Although Lu Yi had the flying wing tattoo, this thing had a lifespan. Back then, Madame Yun had said that this tattoo could only be used for 6 hours at most. After obtaining this tattoo, Lu Yi would occasionally use it. Calculating, this tattoo's lifespan had been greatly reduced, and it probably wouldn't be used for much longer. Therefore, he needed to master the power of flight, and the 8th order was just the threshold to use flying artifacts. One day later, Lu Yi walked out of the cultivation room, followed by Yi. Luo Fu immediately sent a message. After a short while, in the guest hall, the two of them sat down. Brother Yi, I'm a rough person, so let's get straight to the point. After getting familiar with each other, Luo Fu didn't say any polite words. A few days ago, a few guardian envoys from Grand Heaven Alliance came over and wanted to cooperate with my Silver Light Island to attack the 10,000 Demons Ridges station. Lu Yi nodded. It was normal for neighboring or nearby forces to cooperate. When he brought people to attack the Feng family, he contacted Everlasting Veranda. But Brother Yi should know that it's not easy to break a sect's guardian array. Without powerful assistance, even if two forces work together, they may not succeed, and the assistance they value is Winged Flood Dragon. Since Luo Fu had said so, how could Lu Yi not understand his meaning? So, I want to ask Brother Yi if you can control Winged Flood Dragon again. If you can, then let's do something big. Brother Luo, you misunderstand. I can't control Winged Flood Dragon. In fact, I can only guide Winged Flood Dragon to a certain extent. That's enough. As long as Brother Yi can guide Winged Flood Dragon to the stations of those 10,000 Demons Ridges forces, those 10,000 Demons Ridges forces won't dare to resist with the Sky Pillar sect as an example. They might even be scared off. At that time, we just need to reap the benefits. Luo Fu said excitedly, rubbing his palms. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and nodded, we can give it a try. Luo Fu was overjoyed, then it's settled. Don't contact those forces for now. I'll inform Brother Luo when I have definite information. It won't be too late to act then. That's great. Lu Yi got up and Luo Fu saw him off. Soon, Lu Yi rode Hu Pe out of Silver Light Island Station. Luo Fu originally wanted the siblings to accompany Lu Yi, but Lu Yi refused. Although he was willing to give it a try, he felt that it wasn't very reliable. This was also why he didn't make a promise. A vicious creature like Winged Flood Dragon already had enough intelligence. After falling for it once, it might not fall for it a second time. 5 kilometers away from Silver Light Island Station, Lu Yi got off Hu Po's back and took out an item from his storage bag. He circulated his spirit power and threw it in front of him. That item immediately turned into a small, light boat about 3 meters long. The surface of the small boat was engraved with exquisite patterns. The workmanship was very fine. This was Yuan Guang's flying spirit tool, which was about 4 feet wide. There were a few grooves at the bow and stern of the small boat, where spirit stones were placed. Flying on a flying spirit tool not only consumed a cultivator's spirit power, but also the spirit power of the spirit stones placed on it in advance. This could reduce the cultivator's own consumption. The better the quality of the flying spirit tool, the greater the reduction in consumption. The quality of Yuan Guang's small boat was very good. Such a small boat could seat 2 or 3 people at most. Any more and it wouldn't be able to fit. However, it was enough for Lu Yi. The small boat floated in front of him and he stepped onto it. With his previous experience of flying spirit patterns, Lu Yi could be said to be very careful. After he steadied himself, he called Hu Pe. Hu Pe turned into a foot long and jumped onto his shoulder. As for Yi, she had already hidden herself inside Hu Po's body. Everything was ready. Lu Yi circulated his spirit power and the small boat immediately flew up shakily. However, it didn't fly for long before it tilted and fell down. Chapter 256. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, a boat-shaped spirit artifact flew 400 feet above the ground. With the experience of using the flying wings spirit tattoo to fly, coupled with the fact that Lu Ye's control of his own spirit chi was much better than before, it only took him a short time to figure out the trick of flying. Flying like this was even faster than Hu Pe running at full speed. After all, one was flying, while the other was running, so they couldn't be compared. However, riding on Hu Pe didn't consume any spirit chi, while flying on an artifact consumed Lu Ye's own spirit chi. The level of consumption was much lower than Lu Yi had expected, which had something to do with the purity of his spirit chi. Checking the level of his spirit chi consumption, Lu Yi estimated that he could maintain this flight for about 4 to 6 hours. For a cultivator who had just reached the 8th order, this was already a long time. As his cultivation improved in the future, the time and speed he could fly on an artifact would greatly increase. There was also a simple defensive spirit array on the boat. It didn't have much defensive power, but it could withstand the oncoming wind. Lu Yi was sitting in the middle of the boat at the moment, with Yi in front of him, leaning into his arms. As the boat moved forward, her bell-like laughter spilled out. Being able to fly on an artifact meant that he would have another way to travel and escape in the future. If he wanted to fly, he wouldn't have to completely rely on the flying wing tattoo. Half a day later, the sky was already dark. Lu Yi, riding on Hu Pe, arrived at the lake where Ying Jiao was resting. There were still traces of the bonfire left behind by the group last time. Lu Yi didn't know if Ying Jiao had returned, but according to Yi Yi's observations, it was likely that the monster had returned. After having Hu Pe shrink to the size of a cat and having Yi be on standby, Lu Yi took out the scale armor from his storage bag. Looking at the lake quietly, he waited for a moment, but there was no movement. Lu Yi put the scale armor in front of Hu Pe, who immediately sucked in a mouthful of blood. "It's here," Yi whispered. Lu Yi also saw the ripples on the lake's surface. Immediately after, the ripples expanded rapidly, and a fleshy horn slowly emerged and swam towards the shore. He secretly circulated his spirit chi, preparing to activate his flying wings at a moment's notice. With a splash, a huge snake head rose from the surface of the lake. Its two green eyes stared at the scales in Lu Ye's hand. Many of the scales on its body had fallen off, making it look quite miserable. With a distance of 300 feet between them, their eyes met. Lu Yi waved the scale armor in his hand, and Ying Jiao's eyes followed suit. However, unlike the last time, this monster did not rush over immediately even though it still looked like it was thirsting for the scales. The snake's eyes were filled with vigilance. Seeing this situation, Lu Yi knew that his plan to continue luring Ying Jiao had failed. The winged flood dragon had a very high intelligence. Last time, it was attracted by the scale armor. In the end, it ran to the sky-bearing sect's encampment and fought with the sky-bearing sect's cultivators. Although the sky-bearing sect didn't have a good time, it was also injured. The pain caused by the injury made it angry, and it lost its mind. At that time, it only wanted to snatch the scale, but in the end, it fell deeper and deeper. In the end, when the aura of the scale armor disappeared, it crawled back with a dirty face and realized that something was wrong. It seemed that it had been used. It knew that in this world, the human race was fighting endlessly. The reason it had been living in seclusion in this kind of place was because it didn't have many pursuits, and it didn't want to get involved in the struggles of the human race. To it, the life and death of the human race had nothing to do with it. It was fine as long as they didn't disturb it. However, it, who stood aloof from worldly affairs, had been used by a despicable and treacherous human. After returning to recuperate for a few days, the more it thought about it, the angrier it became. But what could it do? The aura that had moved it had disappeared, and so had that despicable human. Until today, that aura had reappeared, and that human had also reappeared. Although Ying Jiao still desired the scale armor, it would no longer act impulsively. It knew that if it wanted to obtain the scale armor, it would have to kill that despicable human. So, after a moment of contemplation, lightning suddenly appeared on its forehead and a pillar of lightning as thick as an arm shot towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi, who was already prepared, immediately soared into the sky. With a boom, the pillar of lightning created a deep pit where Lu Yi was originally standing. In the sky, Lu Yi pulled away from Ying Jiao, his back covered in cold sweat. Although he felt that it was impossible to use Ying Jiao again, he didn't expect that this guy would hate him so much. It greeted him with lightning as soon as they met face to face. If he hadn't been prepared in advance, he wouldn't have been able to dodge it. Landing in the distance, Yi followed. Lu Yi handed the scale armor to Yi and let her try it. Yi took the scale armor and burrowed into the ground to try it out. An hour later, Yi returned and shook her head at Lu Yi. No matter how Yi tempted it, Ying Jiao no longer left the lake where it lived. It had learned its lesson. Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint to send a message to Luo Fu. Ying Jiao didn't come out. There's nothing I can do. Luo Fu quickly replied, his tone a little disappointed, but he knew that there was nothing he could do. Lu Yi had already told him that he couldn't control Ying Jiao, but could only guide its movements to a certain extent. Since it was a guide, he naturally couldn't guarantee that everything would go smoothly. After ending the message with Luo Fu, Lu Yi called Yi, let's go. Since he couldn't lure Ying Jiao out, Lu Yi didn't plan to return to Silver Light Island's encampment. He wanted to continue moving forward. In the latter half of the night, he found a suitable place to rest and waited until dawn to set off. Lu Yi entered the inner circle this time to act as a vanguard for the cultivators of Jade Blood sect. With his authority as a guardian, he could form an alliance contract with a suitable inner circle sect. This way, the cultivators of Jade Blood sect would have more choices in the future. Secondly, it was to take revenge for the Battle of Golden Light Peak. The closest Sky Pillar sect had already been arranged. His next target was Fenghua Courtyard. Lu Yi vaguely remembered that this was the second force from Myriad Devil Ridge to send someone to meet him on Golden Light Peak. The one who came out was a delicate female spell cultivator. Her wind and fire combo caused him to suffer a bit. However, after he got close to her, the delicate spell cultivator was beheaded. Fenghua Courtyard wasn't close. If he rode Hoopa, it would take at least half a month. Flying on a magic tool was faster, but it consumed too much spiritual power. Since he wasn't in a hurry, Lu Yi naturally chose to ride Hoopa. On the tiger's back, Lu Ye's spiritual power was constantly surging in his hands. Yin and Yang Foundation energy was constantly being produced on his left hand, gradually forming an extremely complicated pattern. It was a spirit pattern he had learned from a book. Lu Yi had learned more than one spirit pattern from the book. Although these spirit patterns had their own uses, they couldn't be activated by heart, so they were only suitable for daily practice and couldn't be used in battle. Lu Yi used the spirit patterns he had obtained from the talent tree in battle. He could activate those spirit patterns as he wished. Even with Madame Yun's careful guidance, Lu Yi could only be said to be at the beginning of the path of spirit patterns. Now that he couldn't often ask Madame Yun for advice, he could only learn by himself. Fortunately, he had brought a lot of books on spirit patterns from Madame Yun before he left. As long as he could thoroughly understand the contents of these books, he would be able to greatly improve his path of spirit patterns. There was also a spirit pattern on his right hand. It was a sharp spirit pattern, but Lu Yi was urging his spiritual power to break this spirit pattern and eliminate it. One hand to construct, the other hand to break, this was a very difficult task. Lu Yi wasn't very proficient in it yet. This kind of practice not only allowed one's understanding of spirit patterns to grow, but also allowed one to exercise precise control over one's spirit chi. This was the root of why Lu Yi was able to control 2 types of imperial artifact when he was just a 7th-order cultivator. Now that he was an 8th-order cultivator, if he wanted, he could add 1 or 2 more types of imperial artifact. He did not refine any more spirit artifacts. There was no point in simply increasing the number of imperial equipment. If Lu Yi wanted to increase the lethality of the imperial equipment, then he would have to construct spirit patterns on the imperial equipment when he killed the enemy. This was a difficult task, and Lu Yi had no clue how to do it in a short time, so he could only continue to study spirit patterns and improve his attainments. Once his attainments in spirit patterns reached a certain level, he would be able to construct spirit patterns however he wanted. If he was traveling alone, Lu Yi wouldn't dare to be so distracted, but he wasn't alone. Yi was also with him, so if there was any danger, Yi would warn him. During the day, Lu Yi improved his attainments in spirit patterns, and at night, he studied the books brought out from Madame Yun. Occasionally, when his hands were itchy, he would go to the Mirage Realm to find some excitement. Speaking of which, when he entered the Mirage Realm after reaching the 8th Order, he didn't encounter any insect race. Instead, an 8th Order cultivator appeared directly to fight him. He didn't know why. 8th Order cultivators were naturally not his opponents, and even 9th Order cultivators couldn't last long under his saber. In the Mirage Realm, 7th Order Heaven-grade cultivators had begun to appear. Every time, it was a bitter battle. After a cultivator changed to a Heaven-grade secret art, their strength would usher in an explosive growth. Lu Yi had been able to kill Yuan Guang 2 minor realms above him as a 7th Order cultivator, so it really wasn't difficult for him, but as an 8th Order Heaven-grade 7th Order cultivator, Lu Yi, who was also 2 minor realms above him, had been beaten black and blue. If he wasn't careful, he might even be killed. As a result, Lu Yi had a clear understanding of his current strength. With his current strength, if he fought against a Heaven-grade 7th Order cultivator, it was basically a 50-50 situation. Who would live and who would die depended on who performed better on the spot. The opponents in the Mirage Realm were different every time, so as long as Lu Yi was willing to spend merit points, it was easy to accumulate a lot of combat experience. After this experience was accumulated, it would become a killing technique. The journey wasn't peaceful because Lu Yi was walking in a straight line. It was inevitable that he would break into the territories of some myriad Devil Ridge forces. When he encountered myriad Devil Ridge cultivators, naturally, there would be no shortage of fights. The cultivators in the inner circle were basically between the 6th Order and 9th Order cultivators. Few of them had changed to a Heaven-grade secret art. Generally speaking, those who had changed to a Heaven-grade secret art would be active in the core circle. These people naturally didn't end up well when they encountered Lu Yi, even if they were in groups of 3 or 5. One had to know that Yi was now in charge of the 9 worlds diagram. Coupled with her elusiveness, Lu Ye's enemies would be accidentally pulled into the 9 worlds diagram. Naturally, they wouldn't have a good end. Chapter 257. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, the world energy was rich, so the scenery was extremely beautiful. The group of 1 man, 1 spirit, and 1 tiger walked along the road. In terms of experience, no cultivator at the same level as Lu Yi was more knowledgeable about the battlefield. He left Blue Cloud Mountain from the Second Order Spirit Stream realm and embarked on the journey back to Blue Blood Sect. It took him more than 5 months to reach the 5th Order Spirit Stream realm. This time, he set off from the Sky Pillar Sect's territory and began a long journey. Although other cultivators occasionally went out to travel, they spent most of their time cultivating. The more they walked, the more they saw, so naturally, they were more knowledgeable. In a market square, the travel-worn Lu Yi and Yi arrived together. Unlike the markets in the outer circle, this place was more prosperous. After all, the people coming and going were no longer small cultivators at the 3rd or 4th order. Those who were qualified to wander in the inner circle were at least 6th order. The name of this market was very simple, Heaven's Secret Market, because this was a market led by the Heaven's Secret Business Alliance. Such markets could be found everywhere in the inner circle and core circle. Although cultivators could spend merit points to buy some rare items from the Heaven's Secret Treasure House, they would not use precious merit points for daily life or cultivation. After all, merit points were hard to come by. With transactions, the market naturally came into being. Lu Yi had been to a few markets in the outer circle, but this was the first time he had come to the inner circle's market. After walking around, he found that it was very different from the outer circle. At the very least, the buildings here were neater, and the streets were cleaner. Many rogue cultivators or cultivators from sects came and went here. There were also rogue cultivators in the inner circle and core circle. Perhaps because they were used to it, or because of personal pursuits, or some other reason, these rogue cultivators did not join any sect. Moreover, for a sect, these rogue cultivators who were generally at the 7th or 8th order were no longer suitable to be accepted into the sect, because no one knew if these rogue cultivators' origins were clean enough. It would be bad if they accepted a spy from a hostile sect. Moreover, it was difficult to guarantee their loyalty. In the outer circle, the 3rd or 4th order cultivators still had a chance to join a sect. The higher the cultivation, the more difficult it was to join a sect. Therefore, it wasn't just the Spirit Stream realm that had loose cultivators. There were also loose cultivators in the Cloud River realm, True Lake realm, and even the Spirit Sea realm. Most rogue cultivators chose to cultivate under a certain sect because of the rich spiritual energy. However, there were also a small number of rogue cultivators who did not choose to rely on any sect because there were no practical benefits other than being able to enjoy the spiritual energy in the sect. Instead, they would have to listen to the orders of others. Most of these rogue cultivators lived around Tianji Square to earn their own cultivation resources. It had to be said that the days of these rogue cultivators were actually very poor, but they also lived very freely. Lu Yi came to Heaven's Fate Square mainly to rest for the night and update his 10-point map at the same time. He had spent a lot of money to buy this thing back then. It had been almost a year since then, so there must have been many changes to the map. At the same time, he also had to deal with the spoils that he didn't need, such as the things he got from Silver Light Island. These things took up a lot of space in his storage bag. Most of them had already been sold to Tianji Treasure House on Silver Light Island. The remaining few were used to exchange for cultivation resources. He walked into Tianji Merchant Union leisurely. The internal structure was the same as the one he had visited before. Under the guidance of a steward, he entered a compartment. He made his request and took out the things he wanted to trade. The steward took them and left. While waiting, Lu Yi poured himself a cup of spiritual tea. This reminded him of some memories. He remembered that every time he entered Tianji Merchant Union, he had to drink tea until he was full because the spiritual tea contained some spiritual energy that could be used to improve his cultivation. At that time, he was really poor. He had to count the spirit pills he used for cultivation every few days for fear that he would run out one day. Now, he didn't have to worry about spirit pills. He just had to fight for cultivation resources. Even precious things like merit points were saved up by Lu Yi. After waiting for about an incense stick's worth of time, the steward returned and handed back the updated 10-point map along with a bag of spirit stones and spirit pills. Lu Yi took a quick inventory and settled the transaction. He then asked the steward for a place to stay and was properly received. After a short while, in the heaven room on the 3rd floor of Tianji Merchant Union, Lu Yi sat down cross-legged and inspected the changes in the 10-point map, but no matter how he looked, he couldn't see any difference. Obviously, the changes weren't that big. However, judging from his current location, it would only take him half a day to reach Windflower Courtyard Station. With his previous experience, Lu Yi decided to be more straightforward this time and directly attack someone else's mine. Before, he was only a 7th-order cultivator and had just entered the inner circle, so he couldn't act too arrogantly. Now that he was an 8th order, it shouldn't matter if he acted a little arrogantly. In any case, if he couldn't win, he could just run. And, it's decided. Putting away the 10-point map, Lu Yi took out a thick book and flipped through it while constructing spirit inscriptions on his palm and deciphering them. Diligent practice every day had made him much more adept at this kind of thing than before, which also meant that his attainments in the spirit inscription Dao were gradually improving. The night passed quickly. The next day, Lu Yi, who had enough rest, even took a bath and changed into a clean set of clothes, walked down from the 3rd floor in high spirits. The hall was actually very deserted, and there were no other cultivators except for the people from Merchant Union. Lu Yi didn't think much about it and walked out of Merchant Union with Yi. When he looked outside, he found that there weren't many people in the market outside. It seemed that most of the cultivators here had run away overnight. Lu Yi frowned, not understanding what was going on. Yi said, "Should I ask?" Lu Yi nodded. She turned around and went to the female cultivator in charge of reception at the door and called out sweetly, "Elder sister, what happened here?" The female cultivator said, "I heard that something called the Infinite Mirage Realm has appeared." "What is that?" The female cultivator shook her head, "I'm not too sure." She was just a 4th-order cultivator. If it weren't for her relationship with Heavenly Secret Merchant Union, it would be impossible for her to appear in the inner circle. Lu Yi had already stepped into Merchant Union and casually found a manager. "Do you have any information about the Infinite Mirage Realm?" The manager was all smiles. "Of course we do. What kind of grade do you want? The most expensive one." Today was different from the past. Back then, he had to be ruthless to buy a 10% map. Now, Lu Yi didn't lack money. "Please wait a moment, sir." The manager quickly left. After a while, he returned and handed a jade slip to Lu Yi. "Thank you for your 900 spirit stones." This price was indeed a little too expensive. Lu Yi didn't say anything. He counted out 900 spirit stones from his storage bag and handed them to the manager before walking to the side to check the information about the Infinite Mirage Realm. After half a cup of tea's time, he put down the jade slip. Sensing Yi's gaze, he handed the jade slip to her. Yi also checked it. According to the information revealed in this jade slip, the Infinite Mirage Realm was an independent small space, similar to the chess seat, but not as vast as the chess seat. Moreover, there was more than one kind of Infinite Mirage Realm. There were many kinds. Some Infinite Mirage Realms had beautiful environments, some were eerie, and some were unpredictable. However, without exception, every Infinite Mirage Realm had good things, natural treasures, secret techniques, and secret manuals. Some people had even obtained heaven-grade cultivation techniques inside. Cultivation methods in the 9 regions showed a trend of polarization. Below the heaven-level cultivation methods, including the earth-level cultivation methods, were all things that could be found on the streets. This was also the reason why Lu Yi could buy the red lotus soaring to the sky secret art from the profound sect for only a few spirit stones. If this earth-grade cultivation technique was really sold, it would only be worth a few dozen spirit stones. It wasn't expensive. However, heaven-grade cultivation techniques couldn't be bought outside. There was only one way to obtain them, and that was to spend merit points in the Tianji treasury. If one wanted to exchange for a heaven-grade cultivation technique, it would cost at least 1,000 merit points. Moreover, because of the Tianji treasury's surveillance, heaven-grade cultivation techniques exchanged from the Tianji treasury couldn't be imparted to others. Otherwise, the Tianji treasury would punish them. 1,000 merit points wasn't much for Lu Yi because it was easy for him to kill enemies. Coupled with his status as a guardian, he would occasionally receive a monthly salary for himself. However, many cultivators might not be able to save enough merit points for a heaven-grade cultivation technique even if they saved up from the first order to the 9th order. Because they couldn't afford a heaven-grade cultivation technique, many cultivators were stuck at the 9th order. However, they couldn't do without a heaven-grade cultivation technique because a heaven-grade cultivation technique was related to a cultivator's breakthrough from the spirit stream realm to the cloud river realm. Simply put, without a heaven-grade cultivation technique, there was no way to break through to the cloud river realm. This was also the reason why the cultivators of the two camps were willing to kill each other. Killing enemies would earn merit points, and merit points were related to one's future. Therefore, the infinite mirage realm was very attractive to cultivators. If one could obtain a heaven-grade cultivation technique inside, it was equivalent to picking up 1,000 merit points for free. The information that the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance sold about the Boundless Mirage Realm was very comprehensive because every time the Boundless Mirage Realm appeared, they would spend spirit stones or spirit pills to buy information from the surviving cultivators and record it. Therefore, there was a reason why it was expensive. According to the Jade Slip, the Infinite Mirage Realm would randomly appear anywhere in the Spirit Stream battlefield. The entire Spirit Stream battlefield was so big that even if the probability of it appearing wasn't low, it was still a kind of luck to encounter it. Under normal circumstances, once the Infinite Mirage Realm appeared, the nearby cultivators would enter it to look for benefits. This was also the reason why there were suddenly fewer people in the market. However, the Infinite Mirage Realm only appeared for a short period of time. From its appearance to its disappearance, it would only appear for about a day. Counting the delay in the transmission of information, not many people could enter the Infinite Mirage Realm every time it appeared. There was even one time when the Infinite Mirage Realm was only discovered when it was about to disappear. In the end, by the time the person who discovered it ran over, the Infinite Mirage Realm had already disappeared. After digesting the information he had obtained, Lu Yi led Yi out. After asking a few more questions from the female cultivator at the door, Lu Yi summoned his small boat's spirit artifact and rushed into the sky with Yi. Chapter 258. 80 miles east of Heaven's secret workshop, in a concave valley, gray fog rolled and surged, shrouding the entire valley. No one knew what the valley was like before, but now, it was completely obscured. The valley was not big, with a radius of a few miles. On the surrounding high slopes, cultivators gathered in groups of 3 to 5. Obviously, they had all received the news and rushed over from nearby. This location was not within the range of any faction's encampment. It was considered an ownerless place. There were many ownerless places on the battlefield. After all, the battlefield was vast, and the encampments of the 9 state sects could not be seamlessly connected. There would always be a large area left behind. With this place as the center, there were a total of 4 factions nearby. 2 were from the Grand Sky Alliance, and 2 were from the Myriad Demon Ridge. They were all rank 5 and rank 6 factions with impressive foundations. At this moment, 2 of the 4 factions had arrived. They were the Windflower Court of the Myriad Demon Ridge and the Hidden God Palace of the Grand Sky Alliance. Unlike the itinerant cultivators who came in groups of 3 to 5, the two factions each had close to 100 people. It was obvious that they valued the infinite mirage realm. The main reason why they could come here so quickly was that they were close enough and had received the news in time. The other two factions were not so lucky. Even if they received the news, it would take some time for them to rush over. At this moment, the two factions were sending people to rope in the nearby itinerant cultivators, but the effect was not ideal. The itinerant cultivators in the inner circle were more independent. They were not like the small itinerant cultivators in the outer circle, who could be easily persuaded. They were able to cultivate to this point mostly because of their own abilities. Moreover, it was not necessarily a good thing to have more people exploring the infinite mirage realm. Once they joined a faction, there would definitely be large-scale confrontations with the enemy. At that time, they would have to listen to the orders of others and their lives would be difficult to control. It was better to move in groups of 3 to 5. The itinerant cultivators who were truly willing to join them had already taken the initiative to join them. There was no need for them to rope them in. The itinerant cultivators were more willing to form teams with each other. When Lu Yi arrived on his artifact, he saw hundreds of cultivators gathered here. The scene was chaotic. At a glance, he saw that there were teams of about 100 people on both sides of the valley, facing each other across the valley. There were many female cultivators in one side, and all of them were very beautiful. Some of them were dressed very boldly, and their long legs and slender waists were faintly discernible. They were eye-catching. There was a large flag behind this group of female cultivators. The pattern on the flag was like a few petals. There was a faint floral fragrance from the flag. Lu Yi recognized that it was the Windflower Court's flag. It wasn't that he had seen such a flag before, but he had seen the pattern on the flag. There was a pattern on the 10 points map. In his 10 points map, each sect's name had the pattern of the sect's flag. For example, the pattern behind the Jade Blood sect was a red background with golden flames. There was nothing special about the cultivators on the other side. Lu Yi looked at the pattern on the flag and compared it to the 10 pictures. Lu Yi judged that they were from the Hidden God Palace. One family from each camp arrived. Based on the map, there were at least 4 forces that had the chance to come here. The Overcloud Palace of the Hautian Alliance and the Sunlight Mountain of the Demon's Ridge were the only 2 forces left. At the moment, Yi Shao didn't see any cultivators from these 2 forces. He guessed that they were still on the way. Lu Yi landed on the side that belonged to the Shenin Palace and looked ahead with rapt attention. The reason why he didn't hesitate to spend a large sum of money to purchase information from the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance and rush over after hearing about the boundless Mirage Realm was because the words, Mirage Realm, caught his attention. He had an Aura Fruit Core. Through the Aura Fruit Core, he could spend merit points to enter a Mirage Realm and hone his killing skills in it. He didn't know if the boundless Mirage Realm had anything to do with the one he entered, but it was always right to come and have a look. Looking around, Lu Yi found that things weren't simple. The rolling gray fog in the valley was so familiar. When he entered the Mirage Realm, he was surrounded by the same fog. Was there really a connection between the two? However, it was a bit arbitrary to judge from the gray fog. Whether there was a connection or not, he had to enter the Mirage Realm to know. While he was looking around, a young cultivator came to him and bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoist. I am Ji Yen of the Hidden God Palace. I would like to invite you to explore the boundless Mirage Realm with my Hidden God Palace. What do you think?" Lu Yi looked at the team of the Hidden God Palace and thought for a while. No need. It would be safer to enter the boundless Mirage Realm with the team of the Hidden God Palace, but there would be more restrictions. Ji Yen didn't say much. He just nodded slightly at Lu Yi and walked past him. Obviously, he was going to rope in others. After Ji Yen left, a short cultivator with a mustache next to Lu Yi chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're wise to refuse. Although the Hidden God Palace has a good reputation, I'm afraid you won't get many benefits if you really join them. Itinerant cultivators like us are not suitable to act with those sect disciples. He seemed to have suffered some losses because of this, so he was a little repulsed by cultivators from sections. He changed the topic and said, if fellow Taoist is interested, why don't we act together? We can help each other inside. Fellow Taoist, you should be a weapon cultivator. I'm a spell cultivator and this big guy is a body cultivator. I'll find a ghost cultivator and we'll be together. What do you think? As he spoke, he patted the shoulder of the person next to him. The reason he could pat the shoulder was mainly because the person was sitting on the ground. Lu Yi looked down. At first, he didn't pay much attention to the man sitting on the ground. The man's body was broad and his vitality was abundant. At first glance, he could tell that he was a body cultivator. Just by sitting there, he gave people the feeling that he was as still as a mountain. After taking a closer look, Lu Yi couldn't help but be moved. This body cultivator's spirit power was pure and flawless. After wandering in the spirit stream battlefield for so long, Lu Yi had seen all kinds of cultivators. Without exception, no matter how pure the spirit light on the surface of their body was, there would be some flaws, which were caused by taking spirit pills. He had never seen anyone with a spirit light as pure as his. Until now, he saw one, and it was a body cultivator. This body cultivator sat on the ground, holding a piece of bloody beast meat in his hand and eating it in big bites. As if sensing Lu Ye's gaze, the body cultivator turned his head and smiled at Lu Yi. What do you think, fellow Taoist? The mustached cultivator asked again. Lu Yi said indifferently, no need. The mustached cultivator snorted, I wanted to help fellow Taoist, but since you don't know what's good for you, then forget it. He and his companion were both 9th order cultivators. Facing Lu Yi, an 8th order cultivator, they were qualified to talk about helping. After saying that, he walked towards another independent cultivator who came alone not far away. Obviously, he wanted to rope the other cultivator in. Here you go. The body cultivator sitting on the ground handed over the beast meat in his hand. Lu Yi was about to refuse, but Hu Pe, who was lying on his shoulder, suddenly jumped down and landed on the body cultivator's thigh, gnawing on the beast meat. A smile appeared on the simple-looking body cultivator's face. While feeding Hu Pe, he raised his large hand and stroked Hu Pe's soft fur. Lu Ye's eyes drooped slightly. This is a bit interesting. Ever since he brought Hu Pe back to Blue Blood Sect, besides him and Yi, not many people could get close to it. Even Lingyu, who had a good relationship with Yi, couldn't get up. Wan Lingyu once wanted to experience riding Hu Pe, but Hu Pe, who was lying on the ground and basking in the sun, refused to get up. In the end, it was Yi who spoke, and Hu Pe lazily carried Lingyu for a lap around the peak. As for feeding Hu Pe, it only ate what Lu Yi and Yi gave it. Even if it was second senior sister Shui Yuan, it wouldn't eat a single bite. Lu Yi had never seen Hu Pe so close to a complete stranger, and it even ate what they gave it. Yi didn't show up at the moment, hiding inside Hu Pe's body, so Lu Yi didn't know what was going on. Hu Pe was psychic and could distinguish between good and evil people. Since it was so close to this body cultivator, it meant that there was something about him that attracted it. Or, could it be that only pure people had such a clear mind? Time passed, and cultivators continued to rush over after receiving the news, but at this time, they were mostly lone cultivators in 2s and 3s. The fog in the valley was rolling more and more violently. On the opposite side, in the Windflower Court's camp, there was a tall female cultivator who wore short clothes and exposed her small waist. She was listening to the report of a man beside her. This female cultivator was the vice guardian of the Windflower Court, Chu Qing. In a place like the Boundless Mirage Realm, there naturally needed to be a leader. There had to be a guardian or vice guardian of the station. We'll be arriving at Sunlight Mountain soon. There's still time. The man took advantage of the time he spoke and carefully approached Chu Qing. He lightly smelled the fragrance on her body, and his mind was intoxicated. Chu Qing nodded slightly. That's good. Is there any news from the Lingyun Palace? Not at the moment. Go investigate. Chu Qing ordered. Yes. The man answered and respectfully retreated. The Windflower Court was a very special force. In the Windflower Court, the status of women was generally higher than men, and they enjoyed better treatment. This was because the Divine Ocean Realm cultivator who founded the sect originally intended to only take in female disciples. That Divine Ocean Realm cultivator seemed to have been deceived and toyed with by men, so he had a natural repulsion and resistance towards men. He only felt that all men in the world deserved to die. However, in the process of the sect's development, only taking in female disciples was always very limited. Other things aside, there were very few female cultivators in the body cultivator faction. After all, women loved to be beautiful. Who would be willing to make themselves full of qi and blood? Therefore, after the sect's founder died, the development of the Windflower Court changed and they began to take in male disciples. In general, there were more female cultivators in the Windflower Court, about 70 to 80% of the population. Male cultivators only made up a small portion, and most of them were body cultivators. If there was any danger, it was basically them who took the lead. However, in the Myriad Devil Ridge, the Windflower Court was very popular. After all, who didn't like delicate beauties, and the Windflower Court was full of such fair-skinned and beautiful female cultivators. Chapter 259. Chu Qing looked in the direction of Divine Hidden Palace across the valley. Her gaze collided with that of Divine Hidden Palace's guardian, Gu Kenyang, and they could see the coldness in each other's eyes. Divine Hidden Palace and Windflower Courtyard were neighbors, so their enmity was not small. Moreover, they were going to enter the Infinite Mirage Realm this time. No matter what happened before, once they entered, they would definitely fight if the opportunity was right. Right now, the Infinite Mirage Realm had not opened yet, so no one dared to act rashly. There was no need for unnecessary provocation. Chu Qing's beautiful eyes swept left and right, trying to see if there were any cultivators worth her attention. Soon, she saw a burly man sitting cross-legged on the ground. He was dressed in tattered hemp clothes, and his chest was half exposed. Her beautiful eyes could not help but shrink. If she was not mistaken, this was the itinerant cultivator called Giant Armor. This person was very famous among the rogue cultivators. Even the major sects nearby had heard of him. Whether it was the Shinin Palace or the Lingyun Palace, they had all tried to rope him in and recruit him. Under normal circumstances, the major sects would not recruit a ninth-order rogue cultivator, but Giant Armor was a figure that the nearby sects fought over. It was not only because of his simple nature, but also because he was a body cultivator. He was different from everyone's understanding of body cultivators. It was said that Giant Armor had never killed a single person since he started cultivating. Every cultivator in the Spirit Stream battlefield had a few lives under their hands, but Giant Armor had never. One reason why he could survive without killing was that he had a companion who was a body cultivator. It was said that the two had been working together since they were second or third order cultivators. The body cultivator was the one who killed the enemies. The second reason was that Giant Armor's defense was extremely strong. Basically, no cultivator in the same realm could break through his defense. Even if their cultivation was one or two minor realms higher, it would still be very difficult to injure him. As one body and one method, they had gone from working together as third order and third order cultivators all the way to ninth order. The Hidden God Palace and the Overcloud Palace's attempts to rope Giant Armor in had failed because the spell cultivator who was working with Giant Armor did not agree. He seemed to have always treated Giant Armor as his cash cow and did not allow any other forces to touch him. Therefore, Chu Qing felt a slight headache when she saw Giant Armor's figure. Fortunately, Giant Armor did not join the Shinin Palace. It seemed that he was working together with his Dharma cultivator companion. Therefore, as long as they did not provoke him, they should be fine. In order to verify her conjecture, Chu Qing began to search for traces of that Dharma cultivator. That Dharma cultivator was easy to recognize. He had 2 tufts of mustache and a short stature. He didn't look like a good person. Then, her gaze swept over Lu Yi, who was standing next to giant armor. She turned her gaze back to Lu Yi and channeled her spirit energy into her eyes, focusing her vision to size him up. After confirming that she wasn't mistaken, Chu Qing's eyes slowly narrowed. Why was this person here? And looking at his aura, he was actually an 8th order. Chu Qing's heart skipped a beat. A few months ago, this young man was only a 5th order cultivator, yet he had broken through to the 8th order so quickly. Such cultivation speed was simply shocking. She retracted her gaze and lowered her eyelids. She clenched her fists as killing intent surged around her. On the opposite side, Lu Yi sensed something and raised his head to look at the windflower courtyard. Just now, he felt that someone was spying on him, but there were too many people around, so he couldn't be sure. Hoopa had eaten his fill from the body cultivator beside him and jumped back. The tall body cultivator seemed to be a little reluctant and asked in a low, muffled voice, "What's his name?" Hoopa. The body cultivator nodded, "Giant armor." That should be his name. At this moment, a large boat-like flying spirit artifact quickly flew over from the distance. Seeing the symbol on the ship, the cultivators of the Windflower Courtyard were obviously excited, because it was from Sun Illumination Mountain. A moment later, the ship from Sun Illumination Mountain landed. Led by a handsome young cultivator, nearly 100 people gathered with the Windflower Courtyard. For a moment, the scene was lively. Senior brothers and junior sisters kept calling each other senior brothers and junior sisters. It was a happy and harmonious scene. The cultivators of these 2 families were obviously on good terms. On the other hand, the people of the Shenin Palace all had dignified expressions. Ji Yan, who came to rope in Lu Yi before, stood beside a bronze-skinned man and whispered, "Senior brother, how much longer will it take for the cloud-soaring palace to arrive?" This bronze-skinned man was the leader of the Shenin Palace's team this time. He was also the guardian of the Shenin Palace's encampment, Gu Kanyang. "I'm afraid the cloud-soaring palace won't be able to come," Gu Kanyang said. "It'll take them at least 4 to 6 hours to get here. The boundless mirage realm is about to open." Ji Yan was worried. "Then what should we do? If we go in, we'll be fighting 1 against 2. Should we retreat?" Gu Kanyang shook his head. "If we give up before the battle, how will our Shenin Palace be able to hold our heads up in the future? The boundless mirage realm has many environments. As long as it's not one of those places, it won't matter even if we fight 1 against 2. Sometimes, having more people doesn't necessarily mean success." As soon as he finished speaking, the fog in the valley suddenly surged violently. "It's about to open," someone shouted. In an instant, the noisy valley became quiet. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the fog in front of them. Under everyone's gaze, the fog rolled and gathered in different places. Soon, vortexes of various sizes appeared. In just a moment, the rolling fog suddenly stopped. Only the vortexes were spinning slowly. From the vortexes, an inexplicable aura leaked out. "Senior Martial Brother," Ji Yan shouted. Gu Kanyang waved his hand, "Enter." Since they had decided to enter the boundless mirage realm, they naturally wouldn't back down at this juncture. With that said, he took the lead and jumped into the vortex closest to him. His figure immediately disappeared. With him taking the lead, the cultivators of the Shenin Palace followed closely behind. On the opposite side of the valley, the cultivators of the Windflower Sect and the Sunlight Mountain who had gathered together also jumped into the same fog vortex under the leadership of their leaders. At the same time, the rogue cultivators around the valley also formed their own teams and jumped into different vortexes. The little bearded magic cultivator who had been with giant armor had already returned. It looked like he had not managed to rope in anyone. His expression was a little angry, and he was furious at how heartless people were. It was so difficult to find a suitable collaborator now. When he returned and saw that giant armor was still eating, he kicked him angrily. Get up, let's go. Oh. Giant armor stuffed the beast meat in his hand into his mouth. His cheeks bulged as he followed the magic cultivator with the mustache into a vortex. Lu Yi also jumped into the vortex next to him. He originally wanted to observe the environment inside through the vortex, but he couldn't see anything. After rushing into the fog along the vortex, Lu Yi suddenly felt a force of levitating in the air on his body. Then, he froze in the air. Noises came from all around. He turned his head and saw that the cultivators who had jumped into the vortex were all frozen in the air. Looking back, there seemed to be many holes in the gray sky. From those holes, there was still a steady stream of cultivators jumping in. Lu Yi tried to activate his spiritual power, but he couldn't do it at all. Damn it, it's the Immortal Essence City. Someone shouted. His words seemed to have caused some panic. Soon, a group of people started vomiting. Lu Yi turned his head and saw a towering city below. The city was majestic and occupied an extremely vast area. However, the city seemed to have experienced a war. There were dilapidated fences and dilapidated walls everywhere. Even the city walls that were hundreds of feet tall had collapsed in sections. There were also huge claw marks on some of the city walls. It seemed that a huge creature had used its sharp claws to climb up the city walls. Large patches of black blood stains remained on the city walls. Those blood stains were filled with pitch-black fog, giving people an ominous feeling. Lu Ye's eyes were slightly lowered, and his expression was grave. According to the information he had bought from the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance, the Infinite Mirage connected many different small spaces. Each small space was the ruins of an ancient power. No one knew what era these powers were from or how they were destroyed. Some of the Infinite Mirage wasn't dangerous and even had great benefits. After those powers were destroyed, there would always be many treasures left behind. There were also storage bags left behind by the cultivators who had entered this place over the years after they died. Someone had found an ancient herb garden in the Infinite Mirage. Every herb in that herb garden was priceless. Someone had obtained a spirit treasure in the Infinite Mirage and his strength had increased greatly. Someone had obtained the inheritance left behind by a supreme expert in the Infinite Mirage, therefore, the Infinite Mirage was extremely attractive to cultivators. Every time the Infinite Mirage appeared, it would definitely attract cultivators from all around to explore. However, because the ruins were different, the degree of danger was different. Among all the small spaces connected to the boundless mirage, the Immortal Essence City was undoubtedly the most dangerous place. There were some dangers that cultivators at the Spirit Stream realm could not withstand. Once they encountered them, they would basically die. Most importantly, there were many spirit bodies in the Immortal Essence City. Those spirit bodies seemed to be the original cultivators of the Immortal Essence City. They had died with the destruction of the Immortal Essence City and then became spirit bodies that were trapped here. Some spirit bodies had no thoughts and no consciousness and only followed their instincts when they were alive. However, some spirit bodies still retained their intelligence when they were alive. Therefore, in a place like the Immortal Essence City, the dangers were not only the hostile cultivators but also the Immortal Essence City itself. Lu Yi recalled all the information he had about the Immortal Essence City and looked at the huge palace in the center of the city below. He secretly decided that he absolutely couldn't go to that place. Because that was the City Lord mansion of the Immortal Essence City, and the spirit body of the City Lord of the Immortal Essence City was inside. The cursing in the surroundings became louder. If they knew that the Infinite Mirage was connected to the Immortal Essence City this time, not many cultivators would be willing to come in. Although the treasures were good, they had to be alive to enjoy them. Although Lu Yi didn't curse, he felt a little regretful in his heart. This was because in the small space connected to the Infinite Mirage, there was a place called the Daffin Hall. There were many precious ancient books inside. Although he didn't know why they couldn't be taken out, cultivators could obtain all kinds of inheritances there, including the inheritances of spirit tattooists. The Daffin Hall was the place that all cultivators were most willing to go to. As long as they entered, they would definitely obtain benefits without much risk. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.